Item 1, minutes. The minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 16th of October have been circulated. Is it your wish that I sign them as a correct record? Agreed? Thank you. Item 2, Mayor's announcements. This evening we will again devote up to 1 hour for public contributions, but before we move to that session of the agenda, I have a couple of announcements. I would, as your Mayor, like to draw your attention to the completion of the Civic Art Gallery from the reception to the chamber and the committee rooms corridor. This will show art from the borough community, its arts organisations and individual artists. I would like to pay thanks publicly to the curator Damien Rain, who chairs the arts panel, supported by Alex Doucette and Cass Spencer. Thank you also to Dean Kendall and his facilities team, who've done sterling work in providing the lighting. The current exhibit in the chamber corridor reflects the launch yesterday of my charity, Chelsea Westminster Hospital Foundation Trust, CW+, the Arts for All Community Bridge, including the first outreach with Latimer Community Art Therapy in the north of the borough, and there will be other outlets across the borough over the coming months. Thank you. The second item that I would like to draw to attention is that I've been asked to ask Councillor Dent Code to make a short statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I begin, I'd just like to thank all the expressions of goodwill I've had towards me in relation to my illness. I will be okay, thank you. I've got a lot of therapy to come, but I'm going to be fine. Thank you for all of the people on both sides of the House who sent me their good wishes. Thank you. For those who don't know, I'm going to speak in relation to 13 years of being harassed, heckled and trolled on social media and maligned in numerous fora by Councillor Palmer, who isn't here tonight, and his numerous alter egos, and I'm sorry that the council has taken no action against him for his conduct. I was informed that if I made a statement, his complaint against me would come to no result. So to be clear, Mr. Mayor, after being heckled once again by Councillor Palmer on the 26th of June last year, I reminded him that he'd been advised, I didn't say cautioned, but warned by police that if his behaviour against me continued, police would have to look into the matter further because it could be account to criminal harassment. I contacted the police officer in charge who'd spoken to both of us 2 years previously. She confirmed my understanding, and I sent the exchange of emails to the legal director here. And yet, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to say that I seem to be in the dock tonight. And I'm sorry that 3 council leaders, numerous whips, 3 town clerks and 12 mayors seem to have cared so little about inappropriate behaviour in the council chamber, or indeed been able to do so little about it, that they took no action against Councillor Palmer. And I'm sorry that 3 directors of law have found it impossible to curtail his behaviour, even when, in full council, he made obscene comments about myself and Councillor Healy. And I'm sorry that Councillor Palmer's colleagues in the council have been forced to put up with such deliberately vexatious, childish and troublesome behaviour. And I'm sorry that so many councillor and officer time has been wasted on this in any way whatever. Let us remember that in October 2015, his obscene sexual comments severely upset my daughter, who was sitting in the public gallery in a full council meeting, and she had to make a formal statement for a complaint that went to the council and went absolutely nowhere. And I'm sorry she had to witness that, what she described, 18 years old, as emotional abuse. This particular event proved what I feared, that Councillor Palmer is obsessively fixated upon me. Let us remember that on another occasion in full council, he deeply offended a Grenfell survivor who was sitting in the public gallery. Nothing whatever was happened to him despite going to the Audit and Transparency Committee, and the victim had to make the formal complaint, and little came of that. It's clear that Councillor Palmer doesn't care who he upsets, when, where or how, and he will continue to do exactly as he wishes until he's voted off the council. So I was told that if I say sorry, the matter will be closed. So, Mr Mayor, I'm sorry that if those in authority have sat by and been able to do nothing for over 13 years, while Councillor Palmer brings the council into disrepute. What a shame. Thank you.
Item 3, Chief Executive's reports. Chief Executive informs me that we have apologies for absence from Councillor Ali, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Rand, and apologies for late arrival from Councillor Jackson and Councillor Cox.
Could I also add apologies for Councillor Barrow Cox, who's had to go home sick? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or any other significant interest in any item being considered at tonight's meeting?
I'd like to speak for a moment about the declaration of climate change emergency motion that we had. 5 years ago, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, when we had a ULIS motion in this council, we asked councillors to make declarations, and I think I have the wording here so that I won't fob, Mr Mayor. The wording that we asked, we are asking that any councillor whose car is a band 6 or 7 which emits more than 150 grams per kilometre of pollution declares a conflict of interest and withdraws from the debate. This is very likely to include all four-wheel drives and nearly all SUVs. At that meeting, that was agreed by the Mayor at that meeting. So I think that would also refer to the climate change declaration, and we would ask that you apply that conflict of interest question of declaration to members of this council.
Councillor Kamali.
Mr Mayor, the motion we have before us tonight is about getting to carbon zero. I suggest that given that we're trying to get to carbon zero, we all have a pecuniary interest in that one, and that we all emit carbon, we breathe, we exist, we purchase goods. I don't think we can define exactly where one person falls above the threshold and one falls below. Thank you.
I've decided that we will take note of both comments that have been made and bear them in mind during the debate. Thank you. Public speaking. The council... Sorry, pardon.
Trust. Referring to paper 9(3) as a member of the borough's pension scheme.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on then to public speaking. Item 4, public speaking. The Council is providing up to an hour at each meeting to allow residents to speak on any matter of local interest. 5 minutes will be allowed for each person to address the Council, with 2 minutes for the lead member and also for minority spokespersons to respond. Furthermore, each speaker will receive a written response to their question or questions within 10 days of this meeting. Catherine Howe, thank you for being here, from the Demographic Society, is here this evening to facilitate this part of the meeting, and I will now hand over to Catherine to facilitate the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. So good evening, everybody. Our first speaker is Mark MacDonald, who's going to be speaking to us about the Pembridge Hospice.
Good evening. I'm Meg MacDonald, and I'm here representing Save Our Hospitals, Save the Pembridge Palliative Care campaign, and also the residents of Kensington and Chelsea, who have signed our petition so far of nearly 2,000 signatures, and we're still collecting and it's still growing, and you all have the petition around about this council chamber, so please sign it. Save Our Hospitals aren't here tonight because they're receiving the Freedom of the Borough at Hammersmith and Fulham Full Council for their 7-year campaign to save Charing Cross Hospital and Ealing Hospital from demolition. Our campaign is to save the 13 palliative care beds at St Charles Centre for Health and Wellbeing, which were temporarily closed in September 2018 on the grounds that a specialist consultant could not be found for the palliative medical consultant post. Having spoken to qualified nurses, this problem could have been overcome. The Pembridge Palliative Care Inpatient Unit cares for people with palliative care needs, offering respite, stays for symptom control and pain management, and of course care in the last phase of life. Beds are commissioned for patients in Hammersmith and Fulham, Brent, Kensington and Chelsea and Westminster. The unit was always rated as good in all areas, safe, effective, caring, well led by the Quality Care Commissioners in their last inspection in February 2018. Anyway, it was much more than that, and the stories from people who've signed that petition, those loved ones who died in the unit, speak of a loving, caring, wonderful environment for people in the last days of their life. Since September 2018, the unit has been closed with threats of its permanent closure due to the changes being considered by the clinical commissioning groups in the end-of-life care. The closure of the Pembridge inpatient unit would be a loss of overall palliative care inpatient capacity at a time when increasing numbers of people will wish to use the service as our population gets older with increasing complex medical conditions. The unit is only one component of a local palliative care package. That includes home support, day centre facilities, inpatient respite, symptom control and end-of-life admissions over many months or years. Even the integrated care team at St Charles use the beds for pain management. Therapeutic relationships and support networks are created which should continue throughout the patient's last stages of life. Closure undermines the principles of holistic approach to care. If continuity is disrupted, it has been said, if continuity is disrupted, it has been said that other palliative care units, such as St John's at St John's Wood, St Luke's in Harrow, and Royal Trinity in Clapham Common, can offer these services, but patients and their families will be forced to travel long distances to get to them. Families may need to visit urgently or stay overnight. Travelling long distances causes real distress, especially people on low incomes without cars, as we know in this borough. Speaking to people from the integrated care team at St Charles, there are waiting lists for St Luke and St John's. Patients in the north of the borough go to St John's and to St Luke's, and there's waiting lists, and in the south they go to Royal Trinity. The Pembridge is one of the last remaining units run by the NHS, the others being in Ealing. Reducing the care beds is likely to lead to more non-elective hospital admissions and delayed hospital charges because home conditions, caring arrangements are unsuitable. Pembridge can give short periods of respite symptoms controlled by specialists rather than relying on the support of a network of untrained carers at home. When collecting these signatures, people were shocked that the Pembridge might be shut permanently. At the Health Watch meeting on Monday night, you must have realised the intensity of feeling about the Pembridge closure. Pembridge's reputation is incomparable in this borough. People want to be looked after there, near to friends and family. I do. We're desperately short of carers to look after us in our own homes. The people of this borough and Save Our Hospitals demand a full public consultation and your full support in urging the West London and Central London commissioning groups to keep the Pembridge open, to fund it, refit it for the use of those that desperately need that marvellous care. So please sign the petition. It's going around, and you've also got leaflets which explain a bit about what we're trying to achieve. Thank you very much.
Is somebody going to respond? Yeah.
So, Margaret, thank you for coming. And I think you came to the meeting on Monday. Ah, okay. Sorry. There was somebody that looked very like you. Well, you've really explained, I think, fully to everybody here in the chamber what the service provides and how important it is. And I personally know from personal experience how much that service does to the patient, the families, the carers. And to think that our residents are going to travel to Clapham Common or to St John's Wood is really not realistic. So we are urging the CCG to listen to our residents and to consult fully. And I've signed your petition and we will support you. So thank you for coming. And if you need anything, please let us know.
You seem not to be able to see me tonight, Mr. Mayor. Could I thank Meg for bringing this important issue back to the Council? We did discuss it only last October when I urged the Council to support it. The open meeting that she referred to on Monday night was actually organised by the Health Select Committee, and at that meeting it was very clear that there are large numbers of people who simply do not believe the reasons that are being offered for the continued closure of the 13 inpatient beds at the Pembridge. The senior health manager who held sway for the first hour and a quarter continued to call it a temporary closure, but they all spoke as if the decision had already been taken. When James Benson, the Chief Operating Officer of CLCH, who actually provide the service, was challenged on why he had been unable to recruit the experienced and qualified consultant needed to reopen the Pembridge beds, he admitted that he couldn't recruit now because it was not clear what the job would be in the light of the review, which found that there were too many beds, which we deny. I challenged him on this when he spoke to the new Health Select Committee earlier this month. I did this from the public gallery, you understand, not as a councillor. And he accepted then that there were large numbers of elderly people who live alone and cannot remain in their own homes when the end of their life approaches. And obviously a hospice is a much better resource than going into an acute hospital. He also acknowledged that the alternatives to Pembridge are too far and too difficult to visit for many elderly friends and families. These points were raised repeatedly at Monday night's meeting, and one woman with terminal cancer was adamant that she too would prefer to end her days at Pembridge rather than disrupting her family's lives. It's vital that people who want to die in a hospice should be able to do so close to their home and families. Permanently closing the Pembridge Hospice will deprive many of that service, particularly in the more deprived parts of North Kensington. I'm glad to hear that there is support from the Council, but it must continue. Pembridge must stay open.
So our next speaker is Rahad, who's going to be speaking to us about pollution and tree planting. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rahad. I'm the resident at 5 Warwick Road. I'm here tonight to raise an issue with regard to the pollution, the high pollution level that we have and been suffering at Warwick Road. This is the beginning of Warwick Road with West Brompton Road. I have written to the councillors and quite a few other people in the council. Unfortunately, I haven't got a proper response yet. The reason is that the road, Warwick Road, is part of the TfL, and I'm simply asking for some tree being planted or some other form of green planting in the beginning of this road, and we have been suffering the health of our kids. There is a primary school in beginning of Warwick Road and Elscourt Garden, and they've been suffering as well. And all the residents at number 5, 7, 9, I'm sure the rest of the residents along that road to the beginning of Elscourt Garden has been suffering tremendously. I could tell you every week we clean our windows and I could collect a thick screen of dust and black soot, and this is really affecting our health. And I'm here basically to ask for the mayor and the councillor to lobby this to the TfL or to any other bodies that could help us to create a green screen or plant some more trees along the road and to help us to protect the children, the residents, and the people who live along this stretch of the road. One of the other issues that I wanted to see, obviously I've suggested few options to the councillor, but haven't been able to actually meet them face to face, despite many promises that they're going to do something. But it looks like it's basically being passed from one department to another department. My main concern here is it's being dropped and nobody is taking any action. I would like to see if we could do anything here to basically help the resident at this part of the Warwick Road or Kensington.
Thank you. Okay, are you taking that? Thank you.
I think your last sentence eloquently summed up the last 4 years of Sadiq Khan's mayoralty. Nothing has been done. We are unfortunately caught between a rock and a... hard to find the words, what I would like to describe TfL, but anyway, caught between them. The road, as you correctly point out, is a red route. It is under part of their strategic network. Your ward councillors, I know all three of them from across party, are very, very keen to address pollution in the area. It was rated the worst polluted streets in the country, not just in RBKC. It's a record we don't like holding. It's a record, unfortunately, imposed upon us, as we have no means of changing what is on the roads themselves. To that end, what we can do is we can work on our own roads, the roads parallel and the roads adjoining, and alongside the Governor of St Cuthbert's, we are working to green the school to make sure that the students and the little nursery is protected there, because they're right on the main road and it's unacceptable amounts of pollution. Tonight we're obviously here to talk about a climate emergency, and I think we need to sort of divide what is climate and what is actual air pollution. Climate is something which is international, it's national, it affects everybody on a national level. Air pollution affects us directly and on our doorstep. And part of our Vision Carbon Zero will be addressing pollution on our doorstep, not just climate at an international level. I'm really sorry for the position you're in. I wish we were able to do something immediately to solve it. We are working with your ward councillors on things we can do in the area. I know they're very keen to do more planting, and you have the chairman of the Select Committee on the Environment as one of your ward councillors. It is a personal hobby and enjoyment for him. I'm really keen to do more, and I think the rest of this evening should show that we are keen to do things, and we just have to actually get on with it. And if TfL aren't going to play ball, we have to do things on our own streets and on areas that we can control. Thank you.
Good evening, Rod. I'm one of your ward councillors, and I can tell you in detail what the problem is. There's so much infrastructure underneath the pavements, which is one of the reasons why we couldn't actually plant more trees. When it came to the Olympics, which was one of the reasons why we managed to get the trees that we have got in Warwick Road. Now, Councillor Spalding has put forward a number of plans for actually putting in additional greening. TfL have as far tried to resist. There's actually been plans put in to put ivy to protect the school. As you get further up the road, actually there's considerably more problems, because we couldn't get the trees, the Amelanchier, into the pavement because of the level of the infrastructure. So there have been attempts to get additional trees in the ground. But I would say that we have to look at the problem in a different way. We have to say, actually, is that road, do we need to be looking at people who live on that road at risk, and therefore perhaps look at different measures? Perhaps we should be saying, should, in fact, you be having double glazing? Should that be installed? And perhaps the council, along with TfL, should be looking at health provision for people living along that road because of the restrictions in putting additional greening. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Sam Hancock, who I believe is talking to us about recycling. Is that right?
Yes, roughly. Hi, as mentioned, my name's Sam. I've got 3 related questions on waste and recycling. So firstly, in terms of domestic recycling waste, how much is actually recycled, put back into circulation versus ending up in landfill as unrecyclable? Do the contractors that we use for recycling give us much transparency on that? And then can we do better? Secondly, in comparison to sort of other councils around London, I find that the number of recycling bins on sort of thoroughfares and popular areas, for example Kings Road, are quite lacking in this council. Is there anything we could do better there? Thirdly, a lot of the houses, for example mine and Oakley Street, don't have dustbins on the road and instead rely on putting out waste bags and waste recycling bags. Collections are twice a week, which is great, but as a result, these sort of bags on the pavement end up becoming sort of trash dumping grounds for pedestrians walking by. Again, is there anything we can do better here? And particularly in the sort of day after they've been collected, is there any chance of organising litter picking to avoid stray waste getting blown into our sort of rivers and spaces? Thank you.
Hi there. I'm actually your neighbour, so I can probably address some of the Oakley Street things personally. Your question obviously is quite data specific about the amount of recycling that we collect. I do have the figures. I'm happy to read them out now or bring them to you later. What we do also have is the chairman of the Western Riverside Waste Authority. They're the authority that we take all of our waste to. I know he'd be very keen to take you around and show you exactly how the facility works. It is truly amazing. What we do have is the way that it works with the Western Riverside Waste Authority is that they are the statutory body that we have to take our waste to. What we're trying to do on our side is to increase the amount of recyclate that we do collect from our residents. We got up to 28% this year, which on a national level sounds quite poor, but from a London specific, especially in the way that our houses are divided up and the limited amount of area to have bins, is actually quite good. We're doing quite well there, and we have one of the lowest rates of contamination, which is sort of general waste getting into the recycling. That's why we're improving it. To address your second point about the bins on the street, I think what we need to make aware is the fact that those bins are purely for show. That putting recycling bins on the pavement for anybody to use, for the general public to dispose of anything with no checks of what's going into it, leads to nearly all collections of those bins having to go into the general waste. It only takes one half-drunk cup of coffee going into one of those bins for that entire bag to end up having to go into general waste. It's not an efficient way of collecting it. It's far better that people actually consume less in the first instance, but providing those bins really does not improve recycling. It's actually detrimental. The ones which are positive are the newspaper bins, the narrow aperture. Those ones have a very good collection rate, and I'm keen to sort of roll those out and make sure we have more of them. Oh, sorry, I thought it was still ticking. Is it just 2 minutes? Oh, okay, sorry, all right. And number 3, we do have people that follow the collection vans around, and I'll talk to you afterwards on that one. I'm sorry, I thought I had more time. Sorry, it's topic.
Thanks for coming, Mr. Hancock. You've raised a very important issue. We had a similar question last year, and I have reminded the councillors that there is there are effective measures in the Scandinavian. It's all about changing the public behavior. It will take some time. The council isn't doing enough to tackle this issue, and I think we need to have a proper system in place for 5 to 10 years to change the public's behavior. We need to reward our residents to separate paper-based, glass, even color, which they do in the Scandinavian, and I encourage our officers and our lead members to look into this very carefully. And thanks for coming.
So our next speaker is Nathan Cooper, who I believe is talking about Vision Carbon Zero.
Good evening, everybody. I'd first like to start with an apology that this panel of public speakers is not diverse enough, and we need to do more to empower diversity, socioeconomically, gender and ethnicity-wise as well. So I cycled to RBKC today, and I cycled on a road with almost 2 times the legal amount of nitrous oxide in the air. And Ahad has just talked, and Jem just admitted that the worst road in terms of pollution is in our borough. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with the statistics, but we've been doing lots of petitioning and grassroots activism around the borough. I was speaking last week to a local citizen called Cara, and she was suffering from respiratory problems because of old, inefficient gas boilers and poor insulation. Her home is cold and damp because she cannot afford the ever-increasing energy bills. She lives in fuel poverty and has to visit her doctor because of her respiratory problems. The net zero vision that you will probably, hopefully pass tonight needs to tackle not just carbon emissions, but also public health and other issues as well. In the lead up to the last full council meeting, which was about 3 months ago, local volunteers, including Extinction Rebellion, many people from North Kensington community, were on the streets, and we collected 851 signatories for the council to declare a climate emergency and hold a citizens' assembly. Each and every one of these signatories is evidence of ground level support for climate and environmental issues. More importantly for me though, was the awareness and the concrete plans the local residents had and thought the council should implement. Just a few of the ideas they come up with were solarised public buildings, funding solar in the borough, building more electric vehicle charging points, which I know was a commitment by our new MP, planting more trees, and I welcome the plans about greening, more intensive recycling programs, and divestment from carbon companies, including in the RBKC pension fund. Residents have an acute awareness of how to achieve net zero and how to green the borough. The Tyndall Centre for Climate Research, which is based up at the University of Manchester, said specifically for this borough, RBKC must embark on an immediate and rapid programme of decarbonisation. However, at the moment, there's a serious gap between actions that need to happen immediately and the concrete plans underneath the Vision Carbon Zero. We therefore, North Kensington community and the whole borough, therefore urges the RBKC to hold a citizens' assembly on how to achieve the Vision Carbon Zero. Just some benefits would be that a citizens' assembly would mean that all of the separate work that you're doing in your cabinets and your departments would be mobilised and galvanised under one single mandate. Local residents could give you this mandate and it would make life a lot easier for you. Also, it would affect behavioural change at the grassroots. I've been speaking to a lot of councillors here and a lot of officials here as well, and the one thing they identify as a major obstacle to achieving the commitments that you make in the net zero commitments tonight is behavioural change. To reach those 2040 targets, we need to affect behavioural change, and a broad and ambitious consultation with the public will definitely achieve this. So my question is to you, is RBKC prepared to facilitate a citizens' assembly on climate emergency, including how you achieve a net zero vision? And secondly, will the council leadership make a clear political declaration tonight or in the next 10 days that they will commit themselves to the actions recommended by residents? And if they won't, why not? Thanks.
Hi there, I'm afraid I've been up and down rather frequently. Nathan, thank you for coming in again. I know we met recently when we were sort of getting this up and running. I think first thing I'd like to commit, it was something you made a very key point, was at a citizens' assembly. Absolutely, no problem with hosting one of those. What we're trying to do at the moment, and what we were trying to do last year, is actually get this motion declared, get on with the work. We have obviously continued with the work behind the scenes, and we're now at the stage where we're looking to go out to procure a consultant to look at all of our emissions across the council, all the buildings, all of our services, all of our transportation, to find out exactly where we are. We had done this work previously for our last air quality climate change action plan, and we came away with a target of 40%. We actually exceeded that target and hit 50% on that one, so we do have form on reaching our goals. What we're trying to do here is deliver on a climate emergency. We're aware that it is a huge issue across the borough. I would say for the car charging points, we're actually second in London at the moment for the provision for residents. We're already leading. We were one of the first to bring the lamppost chargers into London. We have new rapid chargers going out. They're being installed on Oakley Street. Sam could probably attest to this at the moment. They're coming. We're embracing new technology, and we have to, because this is not something that can be solved with old technology. And it's with technologies that haven't even been invented yet. We have to keep our minds open, keep looking out there, see what there is, and give everything a go, because we can't get it done with what worked in the past. And hearing from our residents is going to be a huge part of that. They know what they want to see, they know which way we should try and address it. The scientists will give us the overall picture, and then we have to work together to figure out how best to get to zero. So thank you for coming in. That's really kind of you. Thanks.
This is a very critical issue. Of course, the residents of the borough should have a say in how the action plan from a declaration of climate emergency is constructed. But I've been standing in this place since 1991, and I have seen a succession of environment and later climate change policies that Sam has just mentioned too, and none of them have ever measured up to the job, and neither did the strategies that he is talking about. They are simply, they do not only do they not fit the job, but when they negotiated the last one here, it actually said the last one was deficient, and they just simply replaced the wording for the last one on this one. This council has never been up to the job of doing this. I hope we are this time. If we declare a climate emergency tonight, we need to have an action plan that equals the crisis that we have. It was instructive earlier that the cabinet member said that the air pollution problem that one of the questioners mentioned was not our problem. That was Sadiq's problem. It's not our problem. Actually, we've got 10 of the worst polluted roads. We've got some of the 10 of the worst polluted roads in the whole of Europe here. We have for 30 years had that. We add roads all the time, and we have always said it's somebody else's problem. It's not somebody else's problem. If we declare a climate emergency tonight, it's our problem to get it sorted, no matter which partnership or agencies we have to work with. Nobody's going to say that we are not working with or not going to work with the Mayor of London. That's an absolutely stupid thing to say. We have to work with the Mayor of London. We have to work with the government. We have to work with the residents. We should get the residents' views on what should go into a plan, because I'll tell you right now, in 30 years' time or 40 years' time, when this plan, if it happens, will still have lots of pollution covering this borough to the detriment of the children in the schools in this borough. They will not produce a plan that actually gets the job done unless residents inform that plan. And I've been standing here since 1991, I tell you, and anyone who wants to look at these plans, they have never, we still have some of the worst pollution after 30 years, so that means that these plans did not work. We need a plan that works, an emergency plan that works, and the residents should and must be involved in that.
We are out of time. Okay, moving on, because I believe you're debating this later. Our final public speakers are, I'm going to have to get my glasses, Edward Prashar and Munir Taskar, who are going to be speaking about nursery care provision.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, Edward Prashar and Munir Taskar, we're here to talk about the imminent closure of our nursery. Kiddie Horse Court is a nursery that is one of the largest in West London. It's located not in the borough, but very close by in Empress State Building, next to the Met Police office, Met Police building. Sorry. It's one of the largest, and it takes children from as young as 3 months old, which is very important because it is a nursery that is very helpful for working parents. What is the issue? We've been made aware this Monday that the nursery was closing by the end of February, you can imagine that the state of shock for the parents. What we've been told by the management of the nursery is that the Metropolitan Police has served them a notice and that the lease wouldn't be renewed. The reality is that apparently the operator of the nursery has been given notice as far back as June 2019, got 2 extensions since then, while they were finding an alternative solution. Sounds like they didn't find an alternative solution, and we are now with a nursery that's going to be closing. One of the issues that we've been knowing absolutely none of that until Monday. We now have 70 plus children for which we need to find childcare arrangement within a month. That is the background. So let me take you through maybe the 3 main issues we're seeing in this. As I stated, parents only have a month, or barely more than a month, to find care space for 70 plus children in an area where most nurseries are already oversubscribed. There are waiting lists in pretty much all nurseries in the area, whether in Fulham or in RBKC. Economic consequences. We have 23 staff that will be made redundant in 1 month. This matters. Second, out of the 70 plus children, it's becoming pretty clear that only a minority of them will be able to be taken care of in another nursery. That means the vast majority of the parents of the remaining children will have to find different work arrangements, potentially losing their job or having to give up their job for some time until they can find a solution. The third issue, and maybe that's a more long-term one, is that we've been left in the dark for probably about a year about what was happening in the background. The issue here is that parents could have been consulted. The boroughs, because it regards Hammersmith and Fulham also, and maybe primarily, could have been consulted to provide the help. And it's quite astonishing that the operator could provide us with just a month's notice to find alternative arrangement. The business case for them is pretty clear. They need, by just giving us 1 month's notice, they could keep the staff until the very end, and they could keep collecting fees for pretty much all the parents because it's a fully subscribed nursery. But again, a nursery is no ordinary business, and I think it's something that is probably at the heart of what a borough can provide to citizens. Emilia.
Thanks, Edward, for the summary of the issues. So we have some clear asks, and that's the only way we can expect, some good help from you. And I'd like to, give a shout out to Councillor Wade, who has been very helpful in helping us get this far. So we have some clear asks. One is that, we obviously have only a certain amount of contact or influence with the Metropolitan Police Service. You as our local councillors and representatives obviously have more influence with the Greater London Authority, with the Mayor's Office, into whom the Metropolitan Police reports. So we might ask your help in maybe helping our operator get another extension just so that we can transition our children into new nurseries. This is one short-term fix that we might ask your help with. The other sort of short to medium term fix that we might ask your help with is, this is a real burning problem in this borough. Like Edward mentioned, Kiddie Karoo, the nursery right now, which is almost 70 active kids, 12 on the wait list. If that shuts down, everybody else goes to West London, but every other West London nursery has a waiting list of between 10 and 15 already. You guys are aware of this. So it's very real that 30 to 40 friends of mine and Edward's in this group of 120 parents will actually have to take a break from work, right? So there needs to be a long-term address to this, where we would like your help in maybe experimenting with a parent-run model where you help us find a facility, help us with fast-track licensing and all of that, right? So we want to get creative with that, but we really can't do it without your help. So we would really like some help there. And then thirdly, it's all about templatization, processes, and governance. So we would really urge you to put something in place to make sure that in the future, a group of parents, and a group of children don't find themselves in this situation, just with 1 month to replace childcare, right? So we would really like your attention on these matters. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both for what you have said. And first of all, can I just say that I am sorry that it's all come to this. I'm sorry at the lack of consultation that you have had. From a Kensington and Chelsea perspective, our childcare and early education service will support the 80 families that have been affected to identify alternative provision for those children in line with our statutory duties. Clearly, one of the things that we will have to do, which I'd only just realised, is that if the Kiddie Carew Nursery is actually in Hammersmith and Fulham, we will have to work with Hammersmith and Fulham colleagues because it is primarily there, not our responsibility. Clearly, that's what they say. Whilst there is no full daycare provision in the immediate vicinity, there is full daycare provision close by. But as I said before this meeting, I'm very happy to meet with you after you've had your meetings with the Kiddie Carew management. I'm also been contacted by one of my colleagues who is very happy to follow up with the Metropolitan Police as to what they may or may not be able to do, and one of our scrutiny committees is actually looking at the issue of childcare. So if you were to be interested, I'm sure you could get in touch with Councillor Janet Evans. Thank you.
Well, yes, of course, this is one of the most successful nurseries around, I believe, and if it is in Hammersmith and Fulham, then obviously there'll have to be cross talks. We closed plenty of things here over a period of years, so I don't really know why this is happening, apart from the building being reclaimed by the Metropolitan Police. I don't know why they're reclaiming it. Are they closing the building? I don't really know why. Over a period of several years, we've got lots and lots of these issues here on every council, basically. And I can't say more than the cabinet member who says that 80 people well, does that mean they really would be taken up, or we would just look at them? We would look at to see if they criteria or not. I don't know. So. It's a real shame that I don't know how long this nursery's been going. Is it 2 decades, 3 decades? I've no idea. It's not something I know about. I don't know about this nursery. It's not in my ward. I hope the ward councillors in that ward are busy managing that in Hammersmith. You know, if we're always going to talk in ideological terms on every single issue, we're never going to get anywhere. Because if one side does it, the other side does it, and we end up with nothing. We just end up banging each other with political ball games, and that's been going on for decades. Well, when it was Conservative controlled and they were shutting things, you didn't complain or criticise them. No, of course you didn't. You didn't criticise Boris Johnson when he was Mayor of London when he was doing dreadful things to London. You didn't do that. Everything is done in party political terms, and that's why issues like this can never be resolved, because when you suggest something, they shout. They don't care about your nursery. They just care about the fact that it's Hammersmith and Fulham and they're Labour, or it's so-and-so and they're Conservative or whatever. That's all they care about. So nobody's really going to do anything about this because they don't care about it, because it's a different complexion. If Hammersmith and Fulham had been Conservative, they would have been falling over themselves to help you.
Thank you. That's the end of our public speaking section of the council meeting. Thank you very much to all of our residents who have spoken. Thank you. You guys are free to go, and I shall hand back the meeting to the Mayor. Thank you very much.
May I say thank you to the speakers and also to Catherine Howe for facilitating the session. Thank you very much indeed. Now I call item 5. Do any members have any petitions to submit? I've not been notified of any, but does anybody have any petitions to submit at this point? I don't see any hands, so thank you. Can we move to item 6, statement by the Leader of the Council and response by the Leader of the Minority Party. To call item 6, statement by the Leader and by the Minority Party, Councillor Will.
Mr. Mayor, in accordance with Standing Order 42, I wish to move. Sorry, I hadn't turned over the page, apologies. That Standing Order 30 be suspended this evening to allow the Leader and Councillor Mason up to 10 minutes each for their speeches.
Can I correct? I've had information passed to me that both parties wish to speak up to 12 minutes. So if we could make that amendment, thank you. Is that seconded? Good. Thank you very much, Ms. Lawrence. Lido, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we're only a few days from the start of Phase 2 of the Grenfell Tower inquiry. It will be a hugely difficult period for many. Residents and communities across the borough, local councillors here on both sides of the chamber, staff here at the council. But it will be most difficult for the families who mourn their loved ones, and for those who've survived the tragedy or witnessed it. They're now going to have to relive the events that led up to the tragedy in often slow and painful detail. In the coming weeks, we will begin to find out what went wrong, who was responsible, and what opportunities were missed to prevent the tragedy from happening long before the fire brigade arrived. Mr. Mayor, I've apologised in this chamber for the council's role in the tragedy many times, and tonight I can be more specific. In just a few days, you, along with the rest of the country, will hear a legal representative for the council outline our own failings in respect to building control. This is about honesty, it's about being clear and about being truthful. It's important to me personally, it's important to the council, it is important to the families most affected, many of whom I've met over the last few years. I have always said that we will not shirk our responsibilities. If we have done something wrong, we will say so. And that is because, no matter your point of view, your role, or which organisation you represent now or previously, Grenfell is a tragedy that should not have happened, and it is a tragedy that can never happen again. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to emphasise that the timing of what I'm saying tonight is not of our making. The inquiry process, which has been thorough and complex, has only given us a narrow view of all the evidence collated and analysed, alongside our own and the thousands of documents we've provided. Only now is a whole picture developing, years later, with evidence submitted by other core participants and experts. So it is at this stage we step forward with confidence, without potentially letting others off the hook, and tell people where past actions fell short or failed residents. The inquiry will, of course, hear these details in full next Wednesday, when our opening statement is given. That is right and proper, and this will be our approach throughout the coming months and years. We have spent the last 2 years going through each and every service area, from housing to building control, and from community engagement to contingency planning, to change, to improve, to fix things that were wrong, to put things right, and to make them better. We want residents in our borough to be as safe as they can possibly be in their own homes, and this is our priority. Just as we adopted the recommendations from Phase 1 and started work on them the same day they were announced, we will move quickly and make sure this council leads on issues as they emerge. But there is a stark reality we face. 72 people died, and this council could have and should have done more to stop it happening. Mr. Mayor, change at the council has been focused on the areas I've mentioned. They are inarguably linked to the tragedy and the inquiry itself. But Grenfell has had a profound reach into this organisation. It's made us look at ourselves, our values, our behaviours, the way we work, and the way we interact with the communities we serve. I fully understand that many changes we've made will be deemed too little and too late. But my view is that we all need to continue learning from the Grenfell tragedy and consider how it will shape what we do for years and decades to come. Mr. Mayor, I'll take this moment to go through some of the major changes we've made already. I can take you right back to July 2017. We put in place a new leadership team. We reviewed and updated our contingency and emergency planning, and we successfully tested this at Notting Hill Carnival months later. We doubled down on our responsibilities and commitments to rehouse survivors and bereaved families because we understood the complexity of the situation. We deleted the artificial deadlines for families to move into new homes. These deadlines were given to us, and they were not necessary. We committed over 200 million to acquire properties for families in a matter of months. In total, we acquired over 300 homes, one of the largest operations this country has ever seen. Mr. Mayor, I cannot thank the housing staff enough for the work they put in. Under heavy criticism, impossible deadlines, and with the added complexity of helping people who understandably blame the organisation that employs them. They are still working to rehouse and settle some families, and that work will continue long after people walk through their front door of their new home. In March 2018, we took back control of our own housing, creating a new department and recruiting officers to lead it. We got some things right, and we got some things wrong. But we did it with the intention of improving homes and improving services to people in those homes. And we work on this relentlessly every single day. I'm proud of the fact that this has been recognised by residents of this borough who have recently chosen to keep us in that role. I'd like to thank them, and we want to work with them to improve things further. Mr. Mayor, 1 year on from the tragedy, we committed 300 million to refurbish estates across the borough, on top of the 58 million to fund improvements in the Lancaster West estate, home to Grenfell Tower itself. This is a significant investment from us, but it also takes emotional investment from our residents, and they've welcomed us in, and we're now co-designing these projects with them, working together to shape the places in which we all live. New fire deals followed and were agreed by the leadership team in August 2018, and along with every other authority in England, we began to tackle the issues raised by Grenfell in terms of wider fire safety, something that we all continue to grapple with today. Mr. Mayor, we want people to feel supported for the future and for young people to have opportunities on their doorsteps. We reviewed previous plans and decisions on the North Kensington Library, thanks to local residents, so it could stay at its current location at a focal point for the community. The same goes for Warnington College and putting in place the Grenfell Education Fund. All of these things are helping to level up for future generations. We signed off 50 million for Grenfell Recovery, and that was matched by the NHS, giving us a clear and joint commitment to health and care for people in our local communities. And in March 2019, we agreed our new council plan, launched after our biggest ever conversation with residents, with over 2,000 people taking part. By May last year, we'd reduced the number of repairs outstanding on our estates from 5,000 to 500, showing action and making good on the promises we'd made the year before. Soon after, we finalised work with families from Grenfell to help set up a dedicated service. We then introduced a new fire safety team, and we finalised a restructure and retraining of building control, which has just been audited by the national body to check our progress. And now in recent weeks, we have launched a new website designed with residents and based on feedback from residents, and held the first ever Grenfell Projects Fund Decision Day. We put over £500,000 into a pot, and the community decides where it should be spent and on which projects. A huge step forward in terms of working with residents and empowering them to decide what is most important to them. And finally, we agreed a new housing strategy which charts out how we will tackle homelessness, build new homes, and make sure the voices of residents are not only heard but listened to. Mr. Mayor, we're doing a lot, and I believe it shows that we are committed, and we are serious about making sure the legacy of Grenfell becomes a positive one over time. But as I conclude my remarks this evening, we also have to accept as an organisation It will never be enough, and nor should it be. We cannot turn back the clock. We cannot change the events of the 14th of June 2017. To the families from Grenfell, I say this. I hope that Phase 2 delivers the same clarity as Phase 1, and that all organisations involved act upon the findings, resisting the temptation to point the finger at each other. The Council will continue assisting the public inquiry as demonstrated in Phase 1, no matter what the outcome means for us. In the coming weeks and months, actions and decisions of those serving the Council prior to the 14th of June 2017 and in the days after the tragedy will be under intense scrutiny. That is right, and we welcome it. We hope that all the organisations and companies giving evidence over the coming months accept it and help the inquiry get to the full, unvarnished truth. Our first thoughts and our last thoughts will always be with those who lost their lives, their families, and their friends. And we will continue doing our very best to ensure lessons are learned, so that they can be applied by every council, every authority, every building owner, every private landlord, and every single person that has responsibility for housing throughout this country. Thank you.
This is
Mr. Mayor.
This is a point of opportunity for the leader of the opposition party to speak back.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mason, would you please like to speak?
The leader of the council said that 72 people died and the council should have and could have done more to stop this happening. And of course, that's absolutely true, and that will probably be borne out by the inquiry. We can't turn back the clock, the leader says, and we cannot change the events of 2017. And that was said after many inquiries in this country. And of course, we have to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And we haven't had the inquiry yet, if we don't learn from this, learn the lessons. I remember Eddie Duff telling a presenter on TV who had said, we are going to learn the lessons. He says, and I don't want to hear about any more lesson learning. I want you to actually do something to make changes. And in the 2.5 years since this disaster that could have been prevented, I agree with the leader of the council, nothing really has changed in terms of government regulation and government strategy. We still have something like 1,500 to 2,000 buildings across the UK with Grenfell-style cladding on there. That's not my figures, that's the government figures. I had a minister on the other day on the TV saying that he's going to, I think it was Robert Jenrick, saying that they're going to force these building owners to do it, or local authorities to actually start doing this. But yes, as we heard in the briefing earlier, this inquiry is going to be punishing. And we heard the Chief Executive saying that is going to be about then, and we are obviously moving forward. But of course, if you read about other disasters that happened, like Lakenhall and so on, things were only ever fixed when the disaster actually happened, after many people in those industries did what we're doing now and say, we have to fix this, it never must happen again, etc. The King's Cross fire was the same, the Ladbroke Grove train disaster, the signals, Lakenhall itself, which probably 10 to 15 government ministers to 3 or 4 administrations simply ignored what was said there. And we hear a lot about Lakenhall. Lakenhall was a mirror image fire to Grenfell. It started with a TV, and I think it killed about six or 8 people. But it was a mirror image minor fire, but it actually was just like Grenfell. So it's going to be a tough 2 years, probably a tough 3 years, and so it should be. But we've got a chance now, and the younger members of the council who were not here when this happened, they were not elected when this happened, actually, some of them are going to go, on both sides, are going to go forward and become MPs or GLA members or whatever, and really they'll be in positions of power. They'll be in positions where people like us and like the Grenfell Action Group will come and say to them, this is dangerous, you need to listen to us. If you don't do this, people can die. And they were not listened to. The Grenfell Action Group was simply not listened to. They were almost criminalised. Some of them were sent legal letters telling them to desist. So we need to change things for good, because there's been a whole succession of disasters. And if you look at each one of them, they follow the same pattern, where either the industry and the professionals knew best, or it was simply more cost effective to do it this way. And then there was a disaster, and then people died, and then you had to change. It's the bereaved families and survivors that are going to go through the worst period now. I was there the first 2 weeks when the inquiry opened, and they were broken. They were crying, and we were all crying. And that's really what this is about. I thought then, when I was at the beginning of that inquiry, I thought all of us in local government have failed. All of this means an utter failure of local government. I remember saying this. I felt that everything I'd done for 30 years was gone. I thought 72 people are dead. We in the opposition, I myself have gone to, I can't tell you how many select committees over 30 years on all sorts of fire, pollution, God knows what, making representations, and nobody listened really, because who are they? Who are they? And this happened under Blair as well. Blair and Cameron and Mrs. May, and it happened under, they all did it, right? And nobody listened, and then it went down the line, nobody listened to the residents. Who are they? They are not professionals. How do they know about procuring and commissioning and costs and all the rest of it? That's what it became about, the machinery of costs and producing developments that were value for money and unlocking land value and all that stuff. And the whole council is just as guilty as anybody else of doing that. And that's what's going to come out in the inquiry. And we really, really, really have to learn and stop scoring all these political points, because every time we stand up and say something, somebody says, yes, but it's your government, or you did this, or you didn't say that. They don't care about that. They're going to go through hell for the next 2 to 3 years. They're going to go through it all again, and they're already exhausted beyond the meaning of exhaustion. We all know that when we talk to them, when we go there, and those of us that see them every day and every week, they're exhausted beyond the meaning of exhaustion. They've got 3 more years of this to go through. So we really can't, I feel, we really can't put any more families and people anywhere else in the country through this disaster, and another disaster like this can happen if we don't persuade the government to really take on recommendations, to really reform how buildings are built. And of course, declaring a climate change emergency may help that, because if we green buildings, they might be definitely less flammable. But we have to, as a country, we have to really change things and not just say we're changing things. Because I know people who think, well, Grenfell's an issue and it's getting managed over there and we'll go on with this. It's become compartmentalized. People out in the community believe they're being abandoned, that nobody's talking about them anymore, that nobody cares anymore. The newspapers are not there anymore. Nobody's raising the issues anymore. You hear that every time you go on the silent walks, etc. They've forgotten us, they say. They don't care about us. On the other hand, they want justice. And why shouldn't they want justice? 72 people died and 11,000 people are traumatized, and this is never ever going to go away. Aberfan was 54 years ago, and the 80 and 90-year-old parents that are still alive still cry over their parents, over their children, and they have memorials every year. The Glasgow cinema fire that killed 71 children in 1929, they're still having memorials about that now. So this borough is always going to be known for this disaster. and the younger councillors who will probably be here long after some of us are gone, this needs to be brought forward into wherever you go. It's not just about politics, this is people's lives. Money and procuring and saving money and all that tribalist stuff that happens, this led to this disaster. This is what led to this disaster. Austerity, cutting budgets, we know best, who are they? And we had all of that over years and years and years and years, and I had it on almost everywhere I went in the system over 30 years. They would listen to you, thank you very much, your comment is noted, and you wanted to swing at them, but you couldn't, of course, because you'd be in jail. So you know, we've said all the words, I've said all the words, we've said all the apologies, and as Eddie Duff and all those other people who have come here and been on TV and radio said, we just get the job done, just create a system of fire and building regulations and funding for fire brigades and councils that means they don't have to cut corners and that they don't have to put people's lives at risk, because some of them are saying endlessly on TV and radio over periods of time, we knew that was dangerous, we knew that was wrong, but who am I? I'm going to lose my job if I say anything. We need to end all that. Because we fixed the tube stations, and 31 people died in 1987 at King's Cross because nobody listened to the workers on the tubes about the cigarettes and the wooden escalators that went on fire. 31 people died. In every industry, there's a lead up to this, and there was a lead up to this, and we're going to hear it in the inquiry. This is about the people who died there, the people who grieve there, the people I meet every day who look. And I can tell they're suffering. This is what this is about. This is what this is about. The other thing I want to say is about my colleague Emma Dent-Coad. Wherever you may think of her, she suffered for 13 years at the hands of somebody who is a member of this authority. She did. And we as a council need to do something with our procedures, something so that it could be anybody, and it was anybody. She was only the one that stood up. There were councillors on your side that were getting just as harassed, but they couldn't put their heads above the parapet. We need to do something to make sure that the rules of this council mean something, and that we cannot have elected members of an authority being harassed and attacked online or here or whatever, and we do nothing about it effectively, apart from say a few words because we're afraid that it might rock the boat or whatever. That's what happens out there, and women and men get killed. That's what happens out there. We can't and shouldn't allow this to happen. And this happened to her, and it happened to women on your side who are no longer on this council now. They also told us these things, but we had to keep. They should have stood up, but they couldn't, and they didn't. And we have to do something to make sure that doesn't happen. It's in this day and age, elected members being harassed like that is simply, you know, I don't know what to say. That we are controlling a council with £1 billion budget, and we can't protect members of this council. So there's a lot more, of course, but my time is up. But we really have to, because this authority is in a unique position as the authority where this happened, we really need to make sure that the governments in office enact procedures and regulations and so on, create a climate where this thing is impossible, this sort of stuff is impossible, where people can't die because somebody cut corners or whatever. And that's what happened. I mean, it's not party political, it's just what happened. It happened under Blair started it and your government continued it, right? We cannot have blood on our hands anymore. It's as simple as that. And those people out there think we have got blood on our hands. And guess what? This council has got blood in its hands. We just have to do something to wash it off by making sure that more people like those 72 don't die in future.
Councillor Mason, you're over time. Thank you. Now, in this situation that we're in, and having heard from both the leader and the leader of the opposition, and bearing in mind the subject that we're talking about, whatever I say next is going to upset somebody. So what I'm going to say is this, is that there is no room in the procedures that we have in the Council here for anybody else to speak at this particular point in the agenda. But on this occasion, for one person to speak from the back for 2 minutes maximum, I will allow it. But please will you speak from where you are, and please will you speak for 2 minutes only. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very much appreciated.
There's a microphone in the desk in front of you. If you'd like to come and sit at one on the back row. Okay. Use that one there. That's a good idea. That's very practical. Thank you. But please keep it to 2 minutes, because it's a very exceptional circumstance.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
I will, I promise. Firstly, thank you to you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank both leaders, the leader and opposition leader, for their comments. We all have to prepare ourselves. Our community in North Kensington are having to prepare ourselves for phase 2. We have residents whose health has been wrecked. Their mental health is wrecked. Their physical health. We're looking at toxicity. We are having to fight to have fire effluents and contaminants isolated, to have the proper tests done. We're told again and again, it can't be done, it's getting too far beyond the time, it goes on and on. What I'd like to do is just give you an idea of some of the things that we're dealing with. We have a public inquiry, phase 2 coming up. It's a huge thing. Can you imagine how many pages, how much there is to read, to explain, to digest? We have nobody to do it for us. We have to speak to the criminal investigation. We need to find out what's going on. We need to understand laws, criminal laws, organizational laws, all sorts of different laws. We believe that we live in a highly contaminated space. We have asked again and again for independent testing. We believe that we are given a whitewash version of what we asked for. We have suicide, which is not called suicide. We have trauma that is not called trauma. We have PTSD that's just starting now. We have children who are having nightmares. My own child has had very bad nightmares. We have friends who are still living 2.5 years after behind closed curtains, closed doors. Can you imagine living in a flat right beside Grenfell Tower?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no worries, I'm almost finished.
I did
yes, I'm almost finished. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you imagine what it's like living in a flat behind closed doors with children who saw their friends burned to death and have to go back to school? The response to the fire, I am very, very sorry to have to say this, it was so bad as to be beyond belief. Absolutely dreadful. Nobody has come to speak to us about this and ask us what can be done. So, in finishing off, we do all have to move forward somehow. I don't have any answers, we don't have any answers. We do want the truth. We do absolutely request that everybody do their very best and their utmost and to look deep into their souls, because what we're living with is hideous, and it's the ones who are trying to help, what we hear, what we do. Personally, I've been called out to 2 suicides. I've never thought I'd have to do that in my lifetime. Thank you for listening. Please understand the trauma, the heartache, and all the lives that have been broken because of this. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that, and I'm sorry we weren't able to give you more time. What I would suggest in future is if you want to speak and make a point, it was a very powerful message you put forward, that you come and speak during the speaking hour at the Council, because that's the part of the Council meeting that's been specifically set aside so that people can present their own personal experiences and views. But thank you for speaking tonight. I understand that. I understand that. And that's why I allowed it, and this is not as a precedent. Thank you very much. Order of business number 7. Item 7, order of business. In accordance with standing order rules, I rule that the order of business shall be as printed in the agenda. Report of the leadership team. Item 8, report of the leadership team on urgent key decisions. I call upon the leader to move the reception of the report and Councillor Taylor-Smith to second.
I'd like to move, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
I understand there are no urgent key decisions to report to this meeting. I ask the Council to note the report. Item 9, to call item 9.1, report number 1 of the Administration Committee. I call upon the leader to move the reception of the report and Councillor Will to second.
I'd like to move, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to second.
Thank you. I call paragraph 1, terms of reference of the Audit and Transparency Committee. Is the recommendation of paragraph 1.2 agreed? I call paragraph 2, appointment of the Ethics Panel. Is the recommendation on paragraph 2.2 agreed? I declare it carried. To call paragraph 3, co-options to select and scrutiny committees and working group. Is the recommendation of paragraph 3.2 agreed?
Speak to it before we agree it, please.
Of course you
I
may.
thought you'd heard. Okay. I'll just touch on this very briefly. As you know, we reviewed our scrutiny procedures and we changed a lot last summer. And it's functioning well, but it could function better. And what we're trying to do here is co-opt people onto our weapon party so it does work better. But can I just use this opportunity to say that we're missing our Labour comrades. We need our Labour comrades because you have a lot of experience. And for those in the chamber or who are listening to this who don't understand what scrutiny means, let me just explain. That we're each voted onto the council by our residents to represent their views, and as Councillor Mason was saying earlier, so that their voices are heard and that they're listened to. And the main ways that we do that on the council is through scrutiny. We look at what decisions are coming up and what's coming up and how we can influence them. And we make sure that we stand up for our residents and we make sure that we stay in touch with our residents. So I say this to my Labour colleagues, you know, your party seems to have completely lost touch with voters nationally, and so we'd like to say, please don't play politics and, you know, lose touch locally. We remain absolutely committed to improving scrutiny. We'll be appointing later tonight Linda Wade, an opposition councillor, onto the Family and Children's Services Scrutiny Committee, so we look forward to having her representing her residents. We will, until the end of this month, keep the chairs of the 2 scrutiny committees open to you, and we hope that you'll take them up. And if at any time you feel that you'd like to come back on scrutiny so that you can represent those who voted for you, you know, the door is always open. And finally, I'd like to say that we do need to look now at opportunities to perhaps look at having more co-optees on committees to strengthen them and to ensure that the voices of the community is heard. And we'll be looking at that in the Admin Committee in the months ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Mason, would you like the right to reply?
Well, it's good, of course.
Please keep it reasonably short.
It's good that Councillor Campbell is working well with your Liberal Democrat coalition partners, as you did during the election here, and that's why you got your MP. They put your MP in office. But at the risk of rehashing the argument, number one, we are representing our residents. We do have a scrutiny system. We have got our spokespeople. They may not be sitting on your committees as members, but they are working. We have our Budget and Finance Group, which has been working since July on the budget. We have got scrutiny. Scrutiny is not just about the select committees. Those select committees and that system, as you well know, and as you've admitted, is not functioning as it perhaps should. Yes, we've got experience, and we could add experience to those committees. But it just seems that if you want to work with people, it's good if you listen to what they say, given that the council is meant to be listening to what residents say and what opposition councillors say, given that we represent those residents, and see if there's some way that you can compromise a little bit. And I've tried 6 times now since July, we have tried 6 times since July, to propose a form of words or arrangement which would allow us to do that. In other words, you would recognise one or more of our red lines which you wouldn't recognise in July, and those red lines were not something we made up. They came from the community. They came from came from people telling us, our residents, same as your residents tell you in the south what they want. They said that they wanted us to retain the ability to campaign for more devolution and for the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee to be replaced, etc. And then we moved on from that. We moved on from that and had easier resolutions, which I'm not going to go through wording now. You've all seen the wording, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Will. You've seen that. And nobody is moving on the Conservative side. If you want us to, if you agree that we have a right, if you respect our right to represent our residents, and we tell you, and they told you in this chamber, not only us, that these are the things that mean that we could not join the select committees, then surely it's incumbent on you to find a way to bridge the gap. I've tried this for 6 months now, where a number of issues. I have tried for a number of issues. I've tried a number of proposals for 6 months, and they have all been rejected, or my group has.
By your own party?
My group has. You have rejected our compromise proposals to get us back on scrutiny. That's where we are. So, you know, we're not revolutionaries. We're not asking for something revolutionary. We're asking you only to do what you said you would do in the first place, and listen to the opposition. You can't, I mean, if I asked you to do something, do this, you would say, well, why? Well, you hear? This is what we have. This is what we have. So, but we are scrutinising you. We do have a budget and scrutiny committee. We have got our scrutiny process. We are talking to those communities. We're going to continue with the North Kensington People's Convention, who will work on the devolution question, given that you wouldn't do that. We've tried to bridge the gap on the red lines that we discussed here in July and further on. I've tried 6 times, and we're still, nobody's moving. You're not moving. So, please, if you want us back, we want to come back, but we don't want to come back without something that our electorate wants us to support or not support. That's it. You have the power. You've got the voting power. Please do a little tiny compromise. That, I mean, your chief whip and your leader knows what we've tried to do. Right? I don't know if they've told any of you, but I've tried 6 times on behalf of my group, and you will not budge. You need to respect our mandate to represent our residents when we say we can't return to scrutiny until you agree this or some of this. We compromised, you will not compromise. You need to compromise. Call it what you like. You need to come some of the way with us, and you haven't. So we will continue to represent our residents. We will continue to scrutinise the decisions of this council, and if you want us back...
Councillor Mason, can you draw this to close? You've gone over your 5 minutes. Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much. I'm chair of Family Services Select Committee. Thank God your residents don't agree with you, because we've been interacting with lots of North Kensington, and I've had very good feedback. We've co-opted people, we have them on working groups, and we have many visits scheduled, including Grenfell Nursery. So if you're missing out on this opportunity, I feel sorry for you, because you're missing a very important opportunity that has been offered to you, and you are letting your residents down. Thank God I have talked to several people. They really want to join our working groups from your party. You're not allowing it. What is that about? You're playing politics. We have excellent select committees. You haven't given us any chance, but we are going to the people, and we are going to the community, and that's what we're doing. And that is why we are the majority party. Thank you very much. And I want to say that Linda Wade has joined us, and she can bring her experience in Earls Court and help us with this problem with the nursery that was presented tonight. And that's how scrutiny should work, that we work together. And I really appreciate that Linda has joined our committee. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wade. Councillor Wade, would you like to speak, please?
Yeah, I'd just like to correct something that Councillor Mason said. He referred to a coalition. Now, I think that's something in the past. I think it's quite well established that the Liberal Democrats do actually stand for something different. I'm fortunate it's actually different from what the Labour Party stands for at the moment, which is the reason why there is a subtle difference between me and the darling Monica. So,
it's a bit wider than subtle.
Subtle. All right. I like her personally, but I think there is a different political divide. So I would like Councillor Mason to retract that statement about that. All right. Now the other issue is that one of the functions, the fundamental functions about being in opposition, is that you actually do query. I don't see, actually, there is a virtue of actually having only Conservatives on scrutiny committees.
We have 3 requests. They're refusing.
Look, you had, whether they're scrutiny committees, whether they're select committees, whatever you call them, there is no virtue if nobody's actually, asking questions. That is, you know, no. So, because of my oneness, have not been able to be on a committee. I have been asked. Therefore, I am taking up the post, because unfortunately you don't want to be there. Now, I regret that Pat is not on adult social care, because she's great. There is a lot of talent that is actually required. So I'm saying, please, I'm not in coalition with the Conservatives. Many of them will agree that I don't agree with them. So thank you.
Councillors, can I please, I would like to try to draw this to a conclusion, because we have some very important motions to move forward with tonight, and I would like to, we've had speakers from each of the parties, and what I would like to do now, since there is, I would like to ask as to whether paragraph 3.2 is agreed. And well, Councillor, if you could please wait for another occasion, because we must move on to the motions that we've got. We've got very important motions that we've been put back and back from one council meeting to another one, and I really would like us to address as councillors the motions that we've got tonight before us. So, is it agreed that item 3.2 is agreed? Thank you. Item 9.2, report number 2 of the Administration Committee, Charter for Public Participation. I call upon the leader to move the recent report and Councillor Will to second.
I beg to move, Mr Mayor, but Councillor Saran will then speak after.
I beg to second.
Thank you. I ask Councillor Saran to speak to the report.
Mr Mayor, the Charter for Public Participation in front of you tonight is the final piece of the review of the Constitution which this Council has undertaken. We all agreed during the governance review a year ago that a fuller and better description of the relationship between the Council and local people was imperative. At the end of last year, we consulted and engaged on this with local people and organisations, and the Charter before you very much reflects what we heard back from local people. This Charter seeks to reflect our residents' expectation that they'll be able to influence things that affect their communities, and our desire that they must have a say. We are all here because we believe in our communities and we want to represent their views, hear their aspirations for the area and harness their ideas. This Charter is short and we hope clear, and is all about listening to local residents and making sure that their views impact our decisions. If local people feel part of the decision-making process, they're more likely to own the decision because, like all of us, people are more likely to support decisions if they've had an input. And more importantly, involving residents leads to better and more sustainable decisions. We are already working to embrace the commitments here, for example, working with local residents on the Grenfell Projects Fund to give local people choices over what projects should support their recovery. We're also co-designing the bays at Maxilla with local people to design services which they want to see there. This is part of the culture change already underway that's required to transform this council for the better. Members and council staff need to live and breathe this charter, and we will rightly be scrutinised and held to account if we fail to deliver to the high standards that we've set ourselves. We have committed to hold an interim review of all the constitutional changes in the summer and a more thorough review in 2021 to see how all the changes are working. This includes this charter. Mr Mayor, I hope we can unanimously adopt this charter as an important component in the commitment we've made to residents to listen, hear and act upon what they tell us.
Thank you, Councillor Saran. Councillor Press, please, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I welcome the Charter in that it states in writing the Council's intention to increase public participation and involve residents. And I quote from it, at the earliest possible opportunity in the development of policies, plans and services that affect them. And as such, it raises high expectations, as you mentioned, but also a number of questions, and not least, what is participation and what does it look like? It is informing, it is consulting, and it is involving local people. But I'm disappointed to see that the chart on page 6 stops at involving, which to me and most residents I work with is just another form of consultation, which leaves control and choice with the council. And currently, the chart fails to aspire to move to collaboration and empowerment. And among the key questions that need to be answered before the launch in March and well before the first 6 months of its implementation are, when does the council need to consult and when not? When should participation start in the decision-making process? Who decides when and what level of participation? And who reviews and assesses the impact of the Charter and its contribution to positive cultural change? And most importantly, who holds the Council accountable for how this Charter is applied and interpreted? And I appreciate your statement tonight, but this can only be done by local people, residents, local RAs and community groups. I very much appreciate that the Charter recognises the key to its success. We all do the right thing on training days. I believe that working alongside and being part of participatory practices and learning and trusting through doing with residents and with council officers is the only way behaviours and deeply embedded cultures start to change. 8.1 states the two-way reciprocal relationship that's required, and I agree. And so I would urge Councillor Siren and the leadership to establish, and before March the 1st, an advisory panel of residents and community group representatives, voluntary sector reps and councillors with the task of establishing what I call a monitoring and evaluation framework for the Charter and its implementation for the first year. This framework would outline priority areas for participation, desired outcomes and results, how its impact will be assessed, and its KPIs, key performance indicators, for the first year. The Charter can be the vehicle by which this Council actually achieves its overall objective, and that is building trust in the Council's consultation process and increasing people's willingness, especially in the north of the borough, to participate. But this will only happen if local people lead on its implementation and impact assessment. So this council is moving towards public participation, but it needs to adopt and trust participatory impact assessment. And you started to move towards this on the Grenfell Project Day. And so finally, who are the officers who would facilitate, in my view, this advisory panel? Not just the already trained and newly recruited and outgoing community engagement officers, but officers from the key departments that residents have told us need to inform and consult more. In my view, planning, corporate property, it might have been renamed social investment, but corporate property, parks, finance and budgeting, so that all parties develop trust and are accountable by doing the participation together. So as one member of the community has said of the Charter, currently communities could waive the Charter at any meeting and council officers will be unclear as to what is expected of them. So we need to be held accountable, and council officers need a framework for year one priorities and outcomes in order to support their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Press. Could I ask, I understand, I've been advised that there's a printing mistake in the papers, and so Councillor Saran, would you like to do your summing up? I believe that you're summing up rather than the leader, as is printed in the papers, and could you answer the questions that have been raised and also provide any corrections should you wish?
So part of the chart has been cut off. There should be a fourth box which is about participation.
There we go. Well done, Monica.
And in terms of being held to account, I mean, we are going to review all of this in 6 months' time, and we have spoken to the organisations and the individuals who gave feedback on the Charter, and we hope that they will input into that process. So I think we will have the discussion then and see how it goes. But again, I would encourage everybody here to live and breathe what we've written down on this Charter.
Can I ask the officers, the appropriate officers, to find a means of circulating the correct chart to all council members after this meeting? Because I think it's an important point. I'm going to apologise for the fact that the printing papers that people have received have been the incorrect ones, but make sure that they get the correct ones. And if they then have any supplementary questions that they wish to ask, I would understand they should be addressed to Councillor Saran and the officers who work with her in response to that. But can I please move on to ask if paragraph 1.2 is agreed? Thank you. Item number 9.3, annual report of the pension fund. I call upon Councillor Wason to move the reception of the report and Councillor Williams to second.
Move.
Second report.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak on this at all, or can I ask? Yes?
Unfortunately, Councillor Marshall's not here tonight, but I think we should pay testimony that we are one of the best funded pension funds in the country. He's done an exemplary job in getting us to where we are today, and it's for the benefit of all council officers and a number of former councillors, and I think he deserves credit for that one. So.
Thank you. His contribution will be recorded in the record, and I ask the council to note the report. Thank you. Matters referred to council by scrutiny committees. Item 10, there are no matters referred by scrutiny committees to this meeting. Questions, item 11, questions to lead members. Question 1, I call upon Councillor Hammond to ask his question, which is printed in the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question 1, and for the benefit of those who are watching on WebEx without the benefit of the order paper, it is this. To ask the lead member for the environment to update the council on the timeline for implementing changes to parking restrictions in the Onslow area of Courtfield Ward, resulting from the consultation with residents completed by the council in December 2018.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Kamali to reply?
Thank you, Councillor Hammond, for your question. As you'll know, unfortunately, well, rather not unfortunate, but in December, there are other things that we had to deal with as a council, and much to everyone's positive outcome, I must say. But following on from that, you asked for a timeline, and I can give you that. We have collected data from the church for the visitors to find out exactly what requirements they have. We're formulating an equalities impact assessment. That should be complete by the end of the month. Following that, there will be a lead member sign-off middle to late February, followed by the ward members sign-off again in a similar time frame. And then from then on, we'll advertise the mitigation proposals at the end of February or the very beginning of March, assuming they can get everything in order. So hopefully, after 5 years and after many efforts from local councillors, we can bring this forward and hopefully to a satisfactory end for residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond, do you have a follow-up question?
I do, sir. Thank you. And I'm grateful to my friend, the lead member, for his very constructive response. Would he agree with me that this measure should not be framed in a negative way as being in some way against museum goers, against shoppers, against churchgoers, but rather it should be framed in a very positive way as being a measure for our local residents? And does he further agree that while we need to balance all these other interests as a council, if we don't support our residents, we're nothing?
Councillor Kamali, would you like to reply to the question?
I think it almost goes without saying that I completely agree with my council colleague, that he's absolutely right, and I look forward to bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 12, matters raised under Standing Order 11. Does any member wish to raise a matter under Standing Order 11 and speak for up to 2 minutes? Who was first? Councillor Wade. Councillor Wade, I think you were first. But
I'd like to raise the issue of the revisions proposed to the Community Safety Warden Scheme as a matter not only of local concern for Earls Court, but for other wards that are experiencing a rise in crime. A decision to reduce the council-sponsored 17 PCs to 3 PCs, 14 wardens plus manager for 18 wards is penny pinching. A consultation exercise is barely credible. How was it conducted with results from 65 residents out of a population of 160,000 for such an important issue? Delivery is premised by the promise of additional police. They will take time to recruit, train before we see them on our streets, and it's rumoured that this will result for 16 more for the borough. It's not clear what the interface is between the warden scheme and the Met, and how they will be contacted by the public. Whether the wardens be reactive, proactive, or merely in place for reassurance, as the emphasis is placed on problem solving in the report. Their job description is wide-reaching. It's not clear whether there's a duplication or job reductions in other departments to fill these roles. Their skill sets making deployment late at night potentially a risk to themselves without the power of arrest. I realise that it's a balance between being in the bottom quartile of council tax bands, but this is about how safe your residents feel in their homes and on our streets. I would ask the leadership team to look at the review again. This report should be viewed as an initial but not final. There's also the question as to how much of a rebate the borough received from the Met for their not meeting their contractual work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Healy, I understand you wish to speak on Treverton Tower.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I listened to the leader's speech with some interest when she said things like, in the wake of Grenfell, it was a priority to change, improve and put things right to empower residents and make sure that they are heard and listened to. That was not the experience of more than 100 families in my ward who suffered an emergency breakdown in their energy supply, which left them without hot water and heating over Christmas and New Year. This affected people who live in Raymead and Treverton Towers, council properties, with whom Councillor Campbell is familiar because I took her on a tour there some time ago. Their heating and hot water systems are linked, and Raymead was without heating and hot water for 2 whole weeks, and Treverton for a week. Some residents were given space heaters, not all of them, but they could only heat one room, leaving them freezing in the rest of their flats. One vulnerable family was moved to a hotel, and others decided to move in with relatives until normal facilities were restored. What the residents could not understand is why the council did not have emergency procedures in place to ensure that heating and hot water were restored rapidly. After Grenfell, as the leader said, this was the least we could expect the council to do. Residents were angry at the slow response to their situation and likened it to the bad old days of the TMO. One said to me, the whole experience was humiliating and there was no meaningful response until councillors got involved. Many complained that they were not kept informed by the council about progress on restoring heating and hot water. Another complained to me that he was disgusted with the attitude of the out-of-hours service. He described them as inept, arrogant and unhelpful. And one wanted to know why the council does not have a service level agreement in place to ensure that emergency procedures do bring about a swift resolution. I'm aware that housing managers are considering compensation for these families, and I want to make sure that it covers not just the extra costs involved, but the potential threat to their health and so on. More importantly, we need an assurance that this will not happen again, and the works to correct the fault that led to this disaster are completed as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 13, motions. No, if we don't. All right, correction to the facts, but please keep it short.
I'll keep it very brief. I'll just run through very quickly the timeline because the dates you've given aren't right. The leak was on Christmas Eve, 24th, and as you say, it affected both Raymead and Treverton with no heating or hot water. And obviously we had neighbourhood officers on the scene. We visited all the blocks. We sorted out free showers at Kensington Leisure Centre because it was, as you quite rightly say, an emergency. 3 days later, the heating was restored to Raymead Tower, but not the hot water. But Treverton had both heating and hot water 3 days later. Okay, on 30th of December, we tried to carry out a temporary fix over the Christmas period and tried to locate parts. We've got a specialist team in from Cardiff on the 31st with a part that was identified. They failed to fix the homes, but hot water was restored back to Raymead Tower on the 3rd of January. What we've written to tenants about this, I think we have to look very carefully at what happened over that period. I think from that ongoing, we obviously will call a meeting, we will give compensation to the residents. We're very regretful for the impact of this they had as Christmas. And just as an aside, I lost my Keston boiler over Christmas as well. So I know what it's like not having heating over Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Can I move on to item 13, motions? Members will see we have 4 motions for debate. Motion 1 is on declaring a climate and environment emergency. I call upon Councillor Mason to move the motions standing in his name and Councillor Bakhtiar to second. Thank you. Councillor Mason, would you like to speak? Up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I take it as given that we've all read the page and a half of the motion, and for those on the web it would take 5 minutes to read it. And it details the dreadful crisis across the globe, the developing crisis, as we march towards 1.5 and 2 degrees global temperature increase, and we see Australia, polar ice caps, etc., on our screens every day. So whether we move the Council and the Borough to zero carbon by 2025, which is the Labour motion, or 2030 for the Council and 2040 for the wider Borough, the Conservative amendment that waters down the motion, the important question always is, in my mind, is will the Council produce an action plan that gets the job done? That's the most important thing, and if we declare a climate emergency, then we need to act as if it is an emergency. And I would say that if 2030 and 2040 looks a bit like you're kicking it into touch, and 2050, from the government's perspective, that's 30 years away. That's a long, long time. It looks as if nobody would actually do anything in 30 years' time. We're going carbon neutral by 2030, Sem says on the Council website, and he said we're going to have some fast action, upgrading energy efficiency in all Council-owned buildings. I thought we'd done that already. Retrofitting the Council's housing stock to make homes energy efficient, and so on. I believe that's being done. Investing in low-emission hybrid electric vehicles. I thought we were doing that already. Encouraging staff to cycle and walk on their commute. I thought we've been doing that for at least 15, 20 years now. Developing more community energy schemes. That's what I always mean about does the action plan fit the problem, and that is not it. The motion lays out the headline issues, as we've said, and we've all read and understood, but I want to highlight the fact, because residents do, that the asthma and respiratory problems affecting children and babies flagged up by parents in schools, especially in North Kensington over recent years, are a real concern for residents. 2 million Londoners, including Kensington Chelsea residents, suffer asthma and respiratory problems, and if we don't act fast on climate change, and of course that includes air quality, another generation of children and young people will suffer a lifetime of ill health. The Conservative amendment strikes out paragraph 5, for what reason I don't know. Individuals cannot be expected to make these reductions on their own. They're talking about what people can do. Society needs to change and adapt its laws, taxation, infrastructure to make low carbon living both easier and the new norm. And for local authorities, this is in areas where they have significant responsibilities such as waste, public realm, infrastructure, local transport and building standards, etc. And they have replaced that with the sentence, Conservative National Government committing the UK to net zero by 2050 and welcome the legal powers which can be brought to bear to tackle the climate emergency. And I'm not, who wrote this? It's meaningless. And by 2050, of course, the Houses of Parliament and London could be underwater. That's an utterly meaningless sentence. But it's par for the course, and this is why we judge people by what they do, not by what they say. Because, of course, Conservative governments since 2010 have done everything possible to frustrate the promotion of improved air quality in the UK and slam the brakes on an array of renewable energy funding in favour of the fossil fuel industry. That's indisputable. Look at the figures. The election manifesto, their recent manifesto, said nothing about solar power, energy storage solutions, the national grid, or onshore wind. In February 2018, the Supreme Court ruled for the third time that the government's air pollution improvement policy was unlawful under the government's own legislation 8 years after the first non-compliance ruling. This speaks to whether nationally or locally we can believe, and certainly in this chamber after 30 years, the government or this council can produce an action plan that answers the actual crisis that we have. And the government in particular have spent 500k on lawyers fighting 3 cases, and when they knew that 40,000 people across the UK, including 4,000 Londoners, died prematurely annually from dirty air, but they still spent money defending the indefensible. And of course, in 2012, they did the same thing. So That's all right, we don't have the time. We need to look at the planning process, which can build things for 100 years and reform that, and you can see that in the reports. Outsourced and commissioned contracts lasting 7 to 10 years.
Councillor Mason, can you sum up your remarks?
I am summing up. I'm still an orange. We should double tree cover in the borough, as one resident has mentioned. We should set up a carbon offset fund.
Councillor Mason, you are now out of time, the second time this evening, so please could you
Well, I'm
finish?
sorry, but I was on the list to speak for those times this evening. Why am I being penalised for speaking at the times when I am supposed to be speaking? This is not fair, Mr Mayor. I'm very sorry. This is not fair.
I am very happy for you to speak at the times allowed, but I'm
now
very
wasted-
unhappy
you've
that
now
you
wasted a
continuously
minute of
speaking
my time.
over your limit of time.
You've
So you're the
wasted-
only councillor who does so at a repetitive
You
basis.
have wasted a minute of my time already. This is simply not fair. I have to sit down now, but it's not
I will
fair.
give you one more minute if you want to finish off, but please
We've
would you
said in
then
the past,
sit down?
Now you've got them pissed off. Why you do this?
Last paragraph.
Yeah, we should redesign the road space in this borough. We should stop the through motorways. We should move from fossil fuel investments in this council. There's a whole list of things that we should and could do. But I do repeat that offsetting me with your majority party is not a good idea. It means nobody's going to listen anymore because they take their cue from you. I don't think this is fair, Mr Mayor. I do not believe this is fair at all.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Bakhtiar, would you like to speak for 5 minutes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. The motion, Mr. Mayor, is in itself detailed and self-explanatory. But passing a motion is something, then implementing the policy is something else. To be able to implement this motion, pass the motion, then implement into policy, we need supplementary policies. And I think one of them is through planning. Through planning, we could implement many of this. The material we use, we need to encourage builders and investors or developers to use those materials which are approved, safe, and saves the planet. Those materials which is being approved to be safe. The second policy which we need to have is making the developers, we've mentioned this a few times in the past, we need to have a policy to make developers pay for parking charging points, electrical charging points. Certain number, let's say every 2 units they build, they need to pay for 1 electrical charging point. This is a big relief on the council. We don't have the resources because we have to borrow from now on. In the coming months, we will have motions like this, and we need to all work together on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bakhtiar. I should now call the amendment. Councillor McVeigh. No, we have a debate later on. Thank you. So would Councillor McVeigh like to propose and Councillor Schwan formally to second?
Like to move the amendment.
Thank you.
I beg to second.
Thank you very much. Councillor McVeigh, would you like to speak to about 5 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And now for this long-awaited debate. I thank the Labour Group for their motion, but our amendments are actually really important because 2030 and 2040 are far more realistic than 2025. And even with those dates, it's going to require a huge effort from all to make this happen. And when I say all, I really hope we can work across party on this because I think this is incredibly important to work as a team, and I do agree with Councillor Bakhtiar that we need the policies to back up these motions, and Councillor Mason about being call for action. And working as a team is exactly what the council has already been doing. Before Christmas, I attended a cross-department meeting chaired by Councillor Kamali, and each department was tasked with what steps they're going to do to achieve carbon neutral, what the obstacles they foresaw, and what the help they needed. And no surprise here, the two big issues that came up were energy and how we produce this, and transport. Energy is by far the biggest, and as a council we need to look at how all the energy is produced across our housing stock and also in our corporate properties. And then transport is not just about the council vehicles and the council fleet and the waste vehicles. It's about how we as residents and workers and councillors in the borough drive around. Transport, as it's been mentioned many times tonight, is a big climate change issue, but it's also a huge air quality issue, and the much publicised harmful effects to health that this now brings. But also there are going to be some difficult decisions we have to make, and they're not going to necessarily be very popular in the short term. For example, going back to driving, do we all drive too much as a borough? And also back to what Councillor McBatty was saying about planning. How can we put solar panels and double glazing in the conservation area? How can we encourage new developments to have different types of heating and cooling systems? Is our planning system able to do this? So those are just a few questions that spring to mind. But just briefly tonight, I'd like to say a few positive things that are already happening in our borough. There's three things I'd like to share with you. The first is in North Kensington. There's a fantastic community initiative, North Kensington Community Energy, NKCE. And they have really been leading the way with their installation of solar panels on many buildings up near me in the north, and working with some fantastic council officers to make this happen, and the Westway Trust and the community. So it's great teamwork. So another bit of a theme here, team, everyone's working together. The great news is that NKCE's work has been recognised with an award, which is fantastic. Yeah. And the second positive action is from my ward. There's a very large landowner, South Kensington Estates, and they've installed a beautiful brand new water refill drinking fountain, the first of its kind for many years, right outside South Ken Tube. And again, that's been collaborative. It's been council, Thames Water, the private company, London Fountain Company, and the landlord have all come together. But we do need more of these across the borough, and that we are working on. And the final and third positive action is in Imperial College on Exhibition Road, where they have the Grantham Institute, which is a leading authority on climate change. And what can be done to tackle it. And I do urge you all to go online and check it out. There's a very simple 9 ways how we can all make a difference. Going back to what Nathan, one of the public speakers, said earlier about behavioural change and how we all have to completely grasp this nettle. I've unfortunately been online and tried to work out my own carbon footprint, and I've only got halfway up so far, and I'm completely shocked about how high my carbon footprint is. So just a declaration of interest there, I suppose. So those are just 3 examples, and I know there are many more across the borough, but we need to do more. We live in a wonderful borough, in a great city, in a fantastic country, but we are at risk of lagging behind others. For example, in India, they have banned plastic bags, and yes, business is still functioning. You just don't see the blue, ubiquitous blue plastic bags. You know, even the roadside sellers don't have them anymore. And also with 1 billion population, they're about to... 1 point, thank you, Aaron. About to stop diesel cars from their cities and ban plastic water bottles. So we don't want to be at risk of becoming the dirty old man of the West. We need to act, and to again what both my Labour colleagues over there have said, we need to make sure we have policies and actions to back up this motion. So please, let's make this a policy for action that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schwan, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The words of Councillor McVie and my colleagues speak for themselves and provide a logical and timely reasons for the amendment. In particular, I also welcome the public speaker, Nathan, as you've already mentioned, that the comments and suggestions of the Citizens' Assembly and the lead member, Councillor Kamal's response to this, and to bring to our attention that we are ahead of nearly all the London boroughs, bar one, in terms of electrical charging points to our lampposts. I also welcome his idea of procuring a consultant to review all the work that is being done and to provide a holistic view on how to take this forward for the timelines Councillor McVie has suggested, which I think are realistic. So I commend this amended motion to the House and to the Chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Dent-Coad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm trying to remember just how many times the Labour group has brought similar issues to the Council over many years and the very inadequate responses we've suffered. Maybe we're at a turning point, let's hope so. For the benefit of newer councillors, I want to give a very short history lesson. I first became concerned with the dangers of speeding drivers and heavy traffic pollution in the early 1990s when my children were tiny, which is a classic time that people become aware of it. And I realised how dangerous the roads were, and traffic spewing out pollution gave one of my children asthma. We did manage to get some traffic calming in St Helens Gardens, but how many times over the last 30 years have I heard the sickening thud of speeding cars crashing into St Mark's roundabout at speed? After much persuasion, the Council carried out a speed monitoring exercise in 2013 to 14, which revealed, as I thought, that the fastest recorded speed in St Helens Gardens was 130 miles an hour. I brought the 20's Plenty campaign to Council in 2014, and a further 4 years later, Councillor Bacchiar was able to persuade the Council to agree a pilot scheme, which has been put in place. And here it is, Mr Mayor. Frankly, it's laughable. We have about 8 little red worms, little tiny stretches of road across the entire borough, where you're supposed to go 20 miles an hour, and also St Helens and St Helens Ward, where I live, where the road signs are completely ignored, and the effectiveness of this pilot, with no enforcement whatever, can be judged by the horrific accident recently in Chesterton Road, where a speeding car ran over a pothole and careered into the front of the house, destroying not only the brick boundary wall, but also part of the front of the house, causing severe structural damage. Luckily, nobody was hurt. This pilot scheme, Mr Mayor, seemed to be designed to fail, and so it will. And this is the level of council commitment that we've had to date, and let's hope this changes. Similarly, in 2012, I did my best to improve air quality monitoring, having discovered that the Great Western Railway was as guilty as the Westway and our arterial routes in pumping fine particulates into the lungs of Goulburn and Dargano residents. King's College came to the rescue with their excellent pollution maps, revealing that this was quite true. The railway was as bad as the Westway. 4 years ago, when our brilliant Sadiq Khan became mayor, he found a report on pollution levels near primary schools, which the previous mayor had left gathering dust in his in-tray. Absolutely shocking. St Mary Abbott's was the worst one in the borough, followed by St Thomas's next to the railway. What did the council do? They planted some trees and ivy. That's great, but it's not really a long-term solution. I asked Councillor Mason to bring up the potential conflict of interest of councillors with their cars earlier for a very good reason. It's been estimated that a large part of the increase in air pollution in cities is due to the increasing popularity of four-wheel drives and SUVs. A recent report said that if SUV drivers were a country, they'd be the 17th worst polluting country in the world. Increased fuel use by SUVs is the second largest contributor to the increase in global CO2 emissions. The Chelsea tractors of yesteryear have been overtaken by SUVs, which are not only heavy and dangerous to pedestrians, but polluting. Now, the EU target, and there is a target for vehicle emissions where we have to have them, is 95 grams per kilometre. So there we are. In Kingston Chelsea, this would equate to a band 1 parking permit, the same as electric vehicles. So my 14-year-old VW Golf, which I don't use that much, emits 120. It's not too bad. I could do better. SUVs and four-wheel drives, however, range between 160 and 273 grams per kilometre. Band 6 or 7, basically anything over 2,000 cc's, you're in disgrace. I had a brief look through the residence parking permit application form. It's very difficult to get an additional permit, as it should be. However, chauffeurs and nannies can get permits. It really says that. I'm not joking. Here we are, Kensington for you. Electric vehicles, are they the way forward? The cheapest one is £35,000. Our mayoral taxi must have cost at least 70. and yet they're being subsidised with free overnight parking and a tank full of electricity, which will cost about £12. But our plumbers, electricians, decorators and gardeners, the people we rely upon, are being punished for driving the vans we need to keep our homes and businesses functioning.
Councillor Demcode, running out of time.
Thank you. This council has consistently refused to take meaningful positive action on environmental issues that lead to real change. We need less greenwash and less spin. It isn't Stalinist, as one of my neighbours here said, to ditch your gas-guzzling cars, Mr Mayor, and stop the world burning. As Councillor Hammond said, if we don't listen to support our residents, we're nothing. We need to show leadership and agree a climate emergency and take meaningful action now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Durian, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to take a slightly more generic view on this. On this debate about global warming or climate change as it's become known, we often end up talking about saving the planet, and I realise that's not actually written in the motion or the amendments, but it's something we often end up speaking about. I often felt that it's a bit unhelpful to refer to it that way, because the planet has been here for quite some time and will likely be here for some time longer and has suffered a lot of greater cataclysms in its history. It's of course about us at the end of the day. It's about saving humanity, and in particular a civilization based on high energy consumption, historically built on fossil fuels. Now, we in this country began the Industrial Revolution, which in the course of 2 centuries has, of course, seen the greatest transformation in overall human wealth and standard of living ever recorded. Now, aside from some of the more extreme elements of various environmental campaign groups, I think few of us really want to see that reversed. Now, the 2020s will likely answer the question as to whether these high standards of living with high mobility, travel, high levels of international trade and continued economic growth and prosperity is actually compatible with long-term net zero or low carbon emissions. Now, to make sure that question is answered in the right way, we at all levels of government have, of course, a role to play, and of course we have to pursue all of the latest technologies and whatever advancements and practical steps to decarbonise our operations. Now, in terms of RBKC, while 2040 may be more realistic than 2025, it does not mean that nothing has to change until then. And of course we can realise the benefits in the meantime as well, in particular with improved air quality, something particularly pertinent to my own ward. Well, I just want to share one thought. We need to make sure that this fight against climate change doesn't end up becoming a fight against people's aspirations, their desire for a higher standard of living, and a desire to be in control of their own lives and make their own choices for themselves and their children. Because if it does, then it will fail. But a programme that inspires, is rooted in the practical reality of our everyday lives, works with people and not against, as cliched as that sounds, it is the fundamental premise. That will have the best chance of success in the decade ahead, and in particular unleash what I believe will be the great new jobs and investment of the fourth industrial revolution. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Schmetterling, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In some quarters, there may still be debates about the causes of climate change, but there is a broad consensus that something is happening that is more than the normal geological cycle. And not so long ago, I read an article in what looked like a respectable publication that said the next ice age may not take place. In fact, that may not be such a bad thing if one looks at the serious consequences of large parts of the world becoming frozen over and becoming uninhabitable. This would mean that the present global population of about 7.8 billion would be unsustainable. Nevertheless, it is wise that we do something, and the best way to do this is to work on oneself, as I think many people have said, and of course in this case it means our council. Instead of unrealistic, if well-meaning targets, we need to consider and formulate sensible plans that will lead to genuine and enduring reductions in consumption of non-renewable fuels and indeed harmful emissions. These things are to some extent connected. In this context, I would say that plastics per se are not necessarily terrible. It depends on which ones and what we do with them. I definitely support sensible policies based on scientific facts, which will reduce consumption of energy from non-renewable sources. I think even the Council's present plans, even as modified, are pretty ambitious, but well worth pursuing, and they might even achieve the hoped for results. So let's all pull together to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Fuchs, would you like to speak?
Yes, it is.
Good.
I think everybody, just to reassure Councillor Mason, except for perhaps Donald Trump, has to agree that there is a climate emergency. It's not a party political thing. We all know there is. And certainly anybody that's just read the Global Risk Perception Survey, which has been conducted by the World Economic Forum, will know that for the third year in a row, environmental related risks absolutely dominate the risks impact. That 3 out of the top 5 in likelihood and 4 by impact. And the most frequently cited risk interconnection was the pairing of failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation and extreme weather events. We are already seeing the consequences of this, and we're going to see many more consequences to come. And these will be global. There'll be consequences on livelihood, on food security, on health, on economic development, and of course on world peace. The accelerating pace of diversity loss is of a particular concern, and especially to me as a trustee of a nature conservation charity. The Living Planet Index, which tracks more than 4,000 species across the globe, reports a 60% decline in average abundance since 1970. Government, national and local, have a huge part to play in this. But I think we have to recognise that our BKC, that our emissions are actually only 1.8% of the carbon emissions in this borough. And we have to address everything we can to do those carbon emissions. But we also have to recognise that businesses have an enormous and perhaps almost a bigger role to play in this. Look at Microsoft this week. How amazing is that they've committed to be carbon, not just neutral, but carbon negative by 2030. And also in America, 180 other businesses have signed up to being carbon neutral. And also this is a bit of a theme, and I'm glad to see this, that actually I think most powerful of all is every single one of us, all of us in this borough, all of the residents, that we have the biggest power to make change to what's going to happen and make things shift. There's a new campaign that's about to be launched called Make My Money Matter, and it's catalysing a movement to help move trillions from investments which are ecologically, socially and economically unsustainable into those that will drive global change and will also drive new technology which will help businesses and help businesses grow. The UN estimates that there's a minimum funding gap of $2.5 trillion every year to make global change happen in climate. And to make this happen, banks, investors and pension funds need to change how they're investing. The RBKC pension fund was on the agenda tonight, and I have to give credit to the huge success of the investments, which have produced very, very impressive results. There is a 1.3 billion pot there, and it's oversubscribed by 130%. In the UK alone, 2.2 trillion is under management, and over 45 million citizens are enrolled in pension schemes. And it is the power of individuals to look at how their pensions, and not just their pensions, how their investments, how they're spending money, how they're shopping, what they're buying. It's the power of all of us that I believe will really change climate change. And we've got to look at this as a global issue. It's very important what we do here, but we know that what we do here is a tiny, tiny, tiny bit to what we need to have to do in the world. China is 27% of the global emissions is coming from there. What are we doing with Chinese businesses? What are we doing with investments going into there? So I was a bit concerned when I read the pension, the RBKC pension fund, a risk
Councillor Brooks, time.
Oh, well, very quickly, because actually they don't mention investment in sustainability or climate or environmental change in it. So I would just like to challenge our pension fund to look at that and to see if we can change how we are investing our money. Just imagine if the Council's efforts of greener fleets, planting and reaching carbon zero 2030 are undermined by discovering that 30% of our pension fund is invested in fossil fuel extracting and producing companies.
Councillor Foulkes.
So please can we look at that, and I challenge the investment report to do so. Thank you.
Councillor Saran, would you like to speak, please?
Mr Mayor, I just wanted to support what Councillor McVeigh said about working with partners to address some of the climate issues and air pollution issues. And one of the partners which I think is vital in this borough to affecting change is the Westway Trust. And obviously the Westway motorway has been a source of pollution for our residents for 50 years, and addressing this pollution must be central to the Trust strategy, and I think it's something that we need to encourage them to do. And they are starting to do this. Westway have recently established a Green Infrastructure Fund of £60,000 for this year, and this allows local groups, be they resident associations and community groups, to install infrastructure to address as far as possible the pollution from the motorway. So, for example, greening in and around schools can reduce pollution by 40%. And the same could be achieved around community centres and housing estates. So the fund they have is currently looking to support 5 of these projects, and I hope that the demand is there and they will make more available. And the Westway Trust generally are aiming to install green infrastructure wherever is possible, and I hope that the GLA will support the Trust bid to the Good Growth Fund. And this is really an environmental bid that will include pollution management across the whole estate as a central theme. And that initiative will see significant investment across their public realm. And to inform this bid, the Trust commissioned a green infrastructure across the whole estate, and that includes evaluation work to see what's required to make their estate zero carbon. And should this bid be successful, I urge this council to support the execution of it. My point, Mr Mayor, is that yes, we the council must lead on responding to the climate emergency, but in doing this, we really must engage and work with local partners to make the change meaningful.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Saran. Councillor Wade, would you like to speak?
In the October Council meeting, I asked the Council to adopt in the entirety the Public Health England's review of interventions to improve outdoor air quality and public health, published in March 2019. This document sent out the interventions available to local authorities and how national approach can support local actions. I hope the lead member has had the opportunity to be able to read this document, and perhaps we can discuss this further later. Furthermore, I think that perhaps that we could adopt within the planning process that irrespective of the size of applications, that when applications are made, that they include energy and greening efficiencies and waste disposal space. It's to be welcomed that the parks contract will move towards greater sustainability, and electrical charging points are being rolled out, especially just outside my front door. Thank you, what a wonderful hint. Establishing, I think we need to do some more things, so establishing a carbon offset fund, fuel poverty advice service, a review of the policy on double glazing specifications in conservation areas, double glazing grants for residents in high areas of pollution like Warwick Road, boiler scrappage schemes to encourage conversion to energy efficient options, grants for retrofitting accommodation for improving energy efficiency, looking how the council could make share a ride more attractive, looking at the viability of school buses to reduce road usage, making greening of meanwhile sites compulsory, such as in Earl's Court. We've had a long time, a lot of dust getting up everybody's nostrils. Rethinking the policy around pole mounting bins. Along with Councillor Dorian, we are very passionate about pole mounted bins in high footfall areas. Citizens' Assembly, which has been touched on, which has been adopted in other boroughs. School-free bus car-free areas around school entrances, especially around St Philip's and St Barnabas. Looking at our own estates and what measures we're supposed to be putting in place. It's to be regretted that the wide-reaching job specification for the Community Safety Warden scheme did not include fixed penalty notices for idling cars. So why did that go? Perfect. They're doing so many other things. Why couldn't they do that as well? But important is to behaviour change. I think that the council, rather than being behind a computer, using social media, using paper with the borough newspaper, should actually be doing street stalls, being out there, requiring face-to-face, looking at people, talking to people. If everybody they engaged with changed one behaviour pattern, we might be starting a revolution. So target dates are really important, and they're good for setting an objective, and they should not be just put in a diary so that you've ticked off something. But, you know, I think that we do need to be doing things just step by step. Businesses can do certain things, but, you know, if you think of 100 West Cromwell Road, where was the greening on the roof? We could have actually, as a borough, said, actually, you're doing this big building, but we'd like more greening. So there you are. We do have the power. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Perhaps Councillor Henderson, could you speak next?
Is that on? Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to speak because I think there's a really important part of the debate that we're all missing. And that is the fact that even if we stopped all carbon emissions today, we've still chucked a lot up into the atmosphere anyway. So at the moment, we emit, as a world, 37 gigatons of CO2 every year. And the only way we're really going to solve the climate crisis is the rapid removal and storage of CO2. Now, it can be done. So the concrete industry contributes 10 to 15% of global warming in the production of cement. In California, there's a guy there, he's got a plant, he sucks the carbon out of the atmosphere, they make synthetic limestone, and that basically makes the process of making the cement cheaper and basically cuts the carbon. If you had 30,000 of these plants by 2030, we would pull all the carbon that's in the atmosphere out, and then we're back to zero. So I just think while we're having this debate, we need to be lobbying these industrialists to encourage them to use these kind of production methods, so basically to help the mitigation methods that we're doing on the ground to basically pull that out the atmosphere. I've got to just raise one final small point. The British Medical Journal in September 2019, one of those emits enough CO2 for a 180-mile journey, or 25 kilograms of CO2. I couldn't believe it myself. A really simple mitigation measure is surely we should be speaking to the National Health about perhaps issuing non-CO2 inhalers, and that would be the equivalent to me giving up meat. I just think if we're going to have an adult discussion, we need to pull the CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor-Smith, would you like to make a contribution?
Yes. Sorry, thank you for letting me talk. I just thought I'd talk about housing in the context of zero carbon, because it's going to come at a price. And I was very grateful for the Extinction Rebellion, who came when we were doing the housing strategy, and came in and we had a lot of talks with them about what we're going to do about reducing the carbon footprint of our housing. And obviously on new homes, that is relatively easy. We can specify as far as the building contract is concerned and build in all latest innovation to ensure that we have, the best, least impacting homes. But the problem is going to be on our existing housing stock, and it's useful to remember, and it was alluded to by Councillor Fuchs, that we have 90,000 homes in this borough, 9,500 of which are owned by the council, but 2,500 of those are leaseholder. So they're going to be quite resistant to making changes, given it is their home. So we're concentrating on our 6,500 homes. And a lot of these are listed, they're in conservation areas, and if you look at them, almost half of them are built from 1960 and before. So we're talking about old housing stock that presents tremendous challenge for us in order to get them greening. Now, we have difficult decisions to make on this. We put £267 million in terms of the refurbishment of our housing stock based on their stock condition, and that doesn't include making them green. And that's something which we have obviously pledged to look at and to do, and look at how we can improve on their carbon footprint. But obviously this is going to be financed, and here is the rub, and here is what we have to consider here as a council. And I welcome that we're not going to score any more political points on this, Councillor Mason, is that we've got to balance the HRA. So how are we going to do that? Now, we obviously have the opportunity of borrowing, but that obviously will impact on our new homes as well that we're also looking to build. So we're going to have to look at the income. We'll have to look at rental charges, and we'll look at how we recover fuel cost. And that causes great concern for me because, again, we have to be very mindful of fuel poverty and the impact that that has on the most vulnerable within our community. But I think we have to recognise this. And to pick up on what you're saying, this is not about, and pardon the pun, hot air. But we've got to have a plan that works. But we've also got to have a very realistic plan. And I think, so what we can do and what we are doing at the moment is we're looking at how we might take a phased approach on this. And I do find it, I smiled when I saw your suggestion of 2025 in 4 years' time, given that we've got a 7-year refurbishment programme at the moment. But we'll have to take a phased approach. We'll have to look on the basis of charging people for the energy that they're actually using. Our current district heating systems, the way we bill people, don't encourage people to monitor their heating by keeping the window open. And we have to obviously do that. But equally in doing so, we have to be very careful that vulnerable people aren't going to sit there not switching the heating on because they're worried about their cost. We've got already a fuels poverty and sustainable policy coming through, actually, which is aiming towards the goals that we are establishing here, which we'll bring to the council. So we're very much going to involve our regiments and let them know what we're doing and how they can work with us. And we're doing quite a lot of innovation on the Lankwest estate about this and testing new forms of heating and heating systems of how we can actually, reduce the price of this. But equally, I just want to end up by just talking about the partners, because again, this is something we at the council, it's going to find very difficult to address this housing issue within our own borough on our own. We are going to need to look to central and regional government. We are going to look to them in terms of funding in order to do that. And we are going to look for very much guidance on how we can do this within the, put innovation into our buildings. I think that's it, apart from, looking at you in the eye, Councillor Mason, and saying that, if we are going to come up with a plan that works, and we are going to get our involvement, there are going to be painful decisions that we're going to have to make, which will involve our reserves. And I look forward to having the support for your side of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor-Smith. Councillor Thalasides, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The environment and the climate emergency is definitely one of the biggest issues for my generation, and that's why I welcome our commitment to declaring a climate emergency, which we did in 2019, many months ago now, so it's good that we're able to catch up here in the Chamber and vote for that. I have already met with Extinction Rebellion a number of times. We're engaging with all the stakeholders in this community to try and find out how we can best pursue those goals of reaching carbon zero. And I just wanted to respond directly to some of the points that have already been made on planning and transport. And to explain to members like Councillor Bakhtiar, who I thought made some good points about potential conditions that we could put into planning applications, that we are already pursuing and accelerating work on a greening SPD, which we're hoping to bring forward this year. That work is already underway. We're scoping it right now. And we've also made a commitment to bring forward a new local plan as soon as possible. And I think there's a lot of expertise on the other side of the chamber, of the House, that can be brought to bear in scrutiny and in other ways. I would welcome an email or a meeting. I would love to meet with you and to discuss these things further. We're already including things like retrofitting that I know has come up in this debate. These are important things that I think can help to form part of a response to the climate emergency that we know exists. And going on swiftly to transport, I think we do have a very proud record on electric car charge points. Yes. More than 90% of our residents are now within 200 metres of a charge point. Yes. That technology is becoming cheaper and more accessible all the time, and we can be very pleased that we are one of the leading boroughs in all of London on this. And it's something that's popular with our residents and that's being asked for more and more all the time. On other transport-related issues, you've had your turn, if I may. You're more than welcome to respond to these points, but I think, you know...
Councillor Dencode, can you please desist and allow Councillor Thalisides to speak?
Well, actually, the next point I wanted to come on to responds very directly to something that Councillor Dencode, the former Member of Parliament, said, which is on the 20-mile-per-hour campaign. We did declare a pilot, and I think that is, so far, bringing about some positive progress. But you're right that there are concerns around enforcement. That's why we've already been actively looking at that. That was actually one of the items at our transport briefing today. We've already made a commitment to reviewing the pilot with a view to extending it in the spring. That's something I've been working very closely with the new Member of Parliament for Kensington on. Yes. That's absolutely true. And in areas like Barby Road, where I know there's been some concern about ongoing speeding, we've made a commitment today, in fact, to bring speed-activated sensors to that road, and we will be looking to make it as safe and as happy for residents as possible, less noisy cars, less speeding, and a place that's great to live, work and learn for our residents. As I say, I've met with 20s Plenty as well, so I think we're equal on that point too. When we come on to things like cycling as well, I think there's a very important modal shift that does need to happen. We have 7 or 8 kilometres, I think we have 8 kilometres already of cycleways. We're building another 16, and that's a fantastic thing. But we do need to go further, trees notwithstanding. And we are going to do that. So we have an exciting programme of measures that are going to be much more ambitious than before on that front too. But the reason that I don't want to vote for the Labour motion is that 2025 isn't realistic. And they must know that. Yeah. So I think that what we have here is a pragmatic Vision Carbon Zero led by the lead member for the environment who has shown great leadership on this issue. Exactly. And I look forward to working closely with him. I was at the same meeting that Councillor McVeigh referenced in her speech. We are working in a joined up way. There are no more silos here. And we are looking forward to taking our borough down to a carbon zero footprint. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hargreaves, did you want to speak? You still have a...
Mr. Mayor, it was just really reinforce a couple of points on the planning issue. As a councillor for Chelsea Riverside, we have 2 major developments in our ward, with Lots Road Power Station and Thames Tideway Super Sewer. And just really to make a plea that we've been looking today in this motion about how this goes across all aspects of the council's work. And really, I just think we've just picked it up there on planning. But heavy lorry movements and drilling and subterranean work really does contribute to huge pollutions within the very small area in which they are carried out. So it is a plea here, and I know these are being looked at. CTMPs need to be much more strict and need to be enforced much more, and particularly around lorry movements. Machinery and plan, when we're looking at planning permission, are we looking really at the best machinery and the best plan? And if not, we need to be getting developers to actually be using state-of-the-art technology in their machinery and plan. And also, of interest to my own ward, but also to 1 or 2 others in Chelsea, is river movements. Are we ensuring that developers are actually maximising the use of river movements in the bringing in of materials and the taking out of waste? And finally, as we've just heard, which is happening, is all of that's only any good if enforcement actually makes it happen. So a plea, on behalf of improving the environment in my own ward, but I know across the borough, is let's get the enforcement on all these things much stricter. And I know that what you did and others have done on Crest 1 will help that. So I'm really excited with what's in this motion and the amendment tonight. And actually, as far as the issues around planning are concerned, I know we have a very active lead member, and I know many of these things will happen. So thank you.
Councillor Spalding, did you want to speak? No. Okay. Councillor Lindsay.
Talk briefly, Mr. Mayor, about one of the key initiatives that Councillor Falasites and actually Councillor Mason referred to very briefly, namely that tree planting has, in the words of The Guardian last year, mind-blowing potential to tackle the climate crisis. It continues, planting billions of trees across the world is one of the biggest and cheapest ways of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to tackle the climate crisis, according to scientists who've made the first calculation of how many more trees could be planted without encroaching on crop, land or urban areas. Clearly, we need to plant the right trees in the right places. We need to avoid monoculture and to acknowledge the local people who live where they are to be planted. But the bottom line is that tree planting is a cost-effective and a real way of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and much more. But I am surprised that the actual substance of the resolution did not make any reference to planting trees. This borough is the smallest, we all know, and it's the most densely populated borough in London, indeed in the country. So our particular scope to plant many more trees, whether in parks, in private gardens, or elsewhere, is strictly limited. But I do wonder if the beneficial effects of trees might be taken more fully into account in future subterranean development applications and indeed in new developments. Second, I do not think that any councillors at all favoured the felling of some 20 mature trees along Holland Park Avenue for the proposed cycle lane last year. On the contrary, the same cannot be said of TfL, however, and the very fact that it was even contemplated by them in their proposal was very telling. Mr. Mayor, to conclude, trees are important. I googled benefits of trees last night and came across a website called treepeople.org. It listed 22 benefits, from combating climate change, cleaning the air, producing oxygen, to saving water, preventing soil erosion, being a canopy and habitat for wildlife, and some 16 more. Councillor McVeigh referred earlier to teamwork, and we all know that stands for together everyone achieves more, but surely it might also, with a little bit of poetic license, trees everywhere are a must.
Thank you, Councillor Lindsay. You seem to have brought the whole of the council chamber together on that matter, which is the first time this evening. Excellent. Councillor Rossi, your button is on. Would you like to speak? No. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Can I perhaps then ask Councillor Kamali to respond as lead member?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had written a speech, and to be honest, I was going to stand here and read it out and go through it all point by point. But hearing some of the untruths from the other side of the chamber, I think this is an educational moment for everybody. Part of climate emergency is actually knowing what's going wrong with the world. It is not pointing out microscopic local issues. We have to think of this in far bigger terms. The other side say that they want more policies. If they looked at the forward plan, they would see a change to the parking permit to make it based on emissions rather than on engine size. They would be aware that the ULEZ is based on the year the engine was made, not the emissions of the vehicle, a failing of Sadiq. They would understand that the cost of an electric vehicle as a new vehicle, as many new vehicles are very expensive when they're new, if you compare it to the cost of a lease, when you take into the fact that electricity is so much cheaper using all of our charge points, the running cost of that vehicle comes out to be lower than an equivalent petrol and hybrid version. We talk about Chelsea tractors. Did you know, for instance, Councillor Denko, that a hybrid Range Rover actually emits less carbon than your car? I don't think you do, because a lot of these things are educational. And to take Councillor McVeigh's point, the Grantham Institute just around the corner, I've met with one of the researchers at Imperial, and we're looking to work with them on building Vision Carbon Zero forward. I think really the only person on the opposite side of the benches that understands this is Councillor Henderson, and I would welcome, and I would truly welcome, because he has a technical knowledge, which my engineering degree, it goes beyond, and I'd welcome him to come and attend the steering group on Vision Carbon Zero. It is something that I think works across the chamber. In fact, I welcome you all to attend, frankly. We need everybody's ideas on this one. We're talking about, and scrutiny, of course. We have to scrutinise the policies which are on the forward plan that nobody seems to know are there. We have to also make sure that when we're talking about the council and our emissions, as Councillor Folkes, Mr. Taylor-Smith points out, are only 1.8% of the borough. It's a tiny, insignificant amount, but it's not insignificant because we control policy. And like Councillor Thalasitis and planning will bring forward SPD on greening, we will bring forward countless ideas. It genuinely is not the ideas that we're short of. We have heard from all around the world ways to tackle this. Everybody seems to have a good idea. What Vision Carbon Zero is doing, it is putting those ideas down in paper with a clear 2030 target, making sure that we actually achieve it. Planting trees, brilliant idea. Difficult to do in this borough. Perhaps we should look at something else. Should we look at solar panels? Also, quite expensive. We have limited roof space that is easily accessible. Perhaps it makes more sense that we partner with another council and plant trees in their council and combine our net reduction accordingly. There are just so many things we can do. Honestly, I've written this, but it's redundant. What we do have to look at is powers from Central and the GLA. Sadiq Khan has again come out saying that he's going to make London carbon neutral by 2030. Well, he can start by promising that all the buses in RBKC are electric. He currently has 96 electric buses in the fleet. He has, in total, 9,396 buses that are under his control. If he gets them all to zero, that means changing a bus. That means changing 2.5 buses a day just to get his bus fleet to zero. And that says nothing of the amount of energy that's been wasted in the history of the time. The ULEZ is something I welcome coming to RBKC. We are looking at other ways that we can actually go a bit further with camera-controlled enforcement, looking at things we can do to push forward on the ULEZ because it's engine-based. And the engine-based nature of it means that come 2021, when it comes forward, you can drive a 2004 petrol car around RBKC, and that is a low-emission vehicle. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I call on Sadiq to do a lot more on that point. I think we're already doing the things we need to do. The policies are there. They're on the forward plan. We have countless more coming. Of the 60 months you wanted to achieve this in, you wasted 4 of them before you even brought the motion to this chamber. So I don't really know what more to say to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kamali. Now, Councillor McVeigh, would you like to respond?
Contributed enough hot air to the debate, thank you.
Okay, right. Then we come to Councillor Mason. Would you like to respond? Now, please, maximum 5 minutes.
You didn't tell them that. You didn't warn them. You didn't warn any of them that.
I did warn several of them, and one of them has just gone from 5 to 0 in one statement.
Right. Sam, we need no lectures from you. I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't need no lectures from you whatsoever. None whatsoever. Trees, I mentioned trees in my motion. I agree. The reason it was in there for me, because I mentioned it's because a resident in my ward talked about greening the borough with more trees. And the 2025 deadline was because it was residents that brought us this motion in the first place. And when we said what you said, 2025 is too early, they said, listen, if you give them more time, they'll just take it. It's like builders. If you give them more time, they will just take it and take it and take it. So believe in 2025. We put that in there because of the residents' demands on this. Councillor Folkes made many of the points I would have made to Councillor Dorian. We talked about increased standard of living versus what's happening to the planet. Well, of course, food, water, fuel, work, life, all of these things in places across the planet are increasingly becoming a real problem, can lead to war. We've got water wars in various places at the moment. So unless we do something, the planet will become unlivable anyway. The planet can and will outlive us it was here before we were here, and it will outlive us. We actually want a planet we can actually live on. In terms of planning, Councillor Bakhtir and Councillor McVeigh talked about the planning. Well, I thought it was the big things we're meant to be looking at. The planning process builds things that are going to last for 100 years. So solar planning, developments, obviously roads, electric vehicles, solar. We heard members talk about those things. Citizens' assemblies, of course. We should have the residents, as we said earlier, dealing with these issues for us. Saving the planet. What did Councillor Smetterling say? Something is happening. Of course, yes, everyone agrees that there is a climate emergency. And if we're just going to tick box, I think we should just say, well, I thought we were going to be dealing with the big things in the borough, and not the things we're already doing, the things that Sem talked about. I thought we were already doing those. We read those. We can see this. If we're not really going to be doing anything that's going to transform the borough for the next 100 years, say, then let's not bother. If it's just a tick box effort, 30% of the fund, yes, the investment fund on fossil fuels. I talked about fossil fuels when I stood up. But if we're not really seriously going to change the way the borough works, Catherine talks about changing businesses the way that they think about it, because they've got a huge effect on what happens in the borough. If we're not actually going to activate any of that, and we're going to continue to what I call tinkering compared to the problem, I'm not saying any of these things are bad. You know, electric vehicles, solar panels, all these things that Sem talked about and everyone else talked about, electric vehicles, cycling, these are, there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's all fine. We've been doing and leading up to that sort of thing for 15 to 20 years now. But if we want to actually change the way the borough works, planning-wise, road space, the way people live, the way people think about what they buy, driving, investing, slowly, all of these things, we need a plan that actually reflects that. And if we look at plans from around the country, from some of these 100 authorities that have done this around the country, and some of the associations, the planning associations and the town and country planning association, I think it is, you can see they're talking about big scope things that local authorities, even in London, have taken up and are put into their plans. So all of these ideas are great, and I hope somebody's written these down. 20 miles per hour, yes, of course. Councillor Hargreaves, planning again, heavy lorries, more pollution, of course, that's a real problem. We've got it in our ward, in all of our wards.
Councillor Mason, 1 minute, please.
We're going to really have to have a talk, Mr. Mayor, for sure. We're really going to. I am sticking to the rules, but your side should stick to the rules, and the Mayor should be fair about applying that, and we don't see that. But I think I've covered all the points anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. I now put the amendment to the vote. Will all those in favour of the amendment please show?
Oh, come on. Not seriously.
And all those against, please show. Yeah, and those abstaining?
Abstention. No abstentions. No abstentions.
Right. There are no abstentions. You going to record? Okay, we'll record the names of the votes for and against. Okay. Yes, we have. Councillor, we haven't got to that point yet. So I declare that amendment carried. And we will record the vote. Dear me, Councillor Mason. Councillor Mason may wish to sum up.
He's done that.
No. He's done that.
He's done that.
Okay.
Multiple times.
Well, simply.
Yeah. The motion.
Now the motion as amended to the vote. Will all those in favour please show?
Wow, full house.
So I understand that there are none against and none abstaining. Is that correct?
Any against? Just ask them anyway. Just
Can we record that it was the motion as amended was carried without against or NEMCON? I declare the motion as amended carried. Now, as we've reached the hour of 9:30, I understand the wish of the whips is that we finish the meeting now. We don't take any further motions. Yeah. We have some business that we must conclude. We have...
It's not fair that for the second time we've not got to the education resolution, and I was particularly looking forward to debating this tonight because we could then really see some clear red water between the two sides of the chamber. And it does seem to me that this is becoming a real problem, the backlog with resolutions, and I would like you to again consider starting our council meetings at 6 o'clock so that we actually don't keep having this situation.
Thank you, Councillor. I will discuss this with the whips from both parties outside this meeting, but I don't think it's a matter for debate now. And I think we really need to bring this meeting to a conclusion. So if I could move on to committees, overview and scrutiny committees. The Council was asked to take note of the action pursuant to Standing Order 34.02 was taken by the Mayor on 29th of October 2019 to note the resignation of Councillor Rendell from the committee and appoint Councillor Round in his place in time for the meeting of the 29th of November. Licensing Committee, resignation Councillor Jackson, nomination Councillor Will, Councillor Wasson. Family Children Services Scrutiny Committee, resignation Councillor Palmer, nomination by Councillor Will, Councillor Wade. Outside Organisations, Camden Charities, resignation Councillor Rossi. Can we take these as read? Agreed? Thank you. The meeting has now concluded. Thank you.